If you take a look, believe it or not, there are millions of true Orthodox all over the world who are confessing the faith. They're teaching the Orthodox faith you thought you learned. So for 90% of you listening to this podcast, you didn't know who I was, but you did believe in the seven councils, right? You don't believe that the fourth council or the fifth council is up for debate or discussion? You don't believe David Bentley Hart isn't a heretic? You think he might be one? Become true Orthodox. You've made it this far, and we invite you to do so. Thank you.
Good evening. Through the prayers of Holy Fathers, Lord Jesus Christ, our God, have mercy on us and save us. Welcome all in the chat. I see there's a whole lot of comments to start. Wow. Okay. Good evening, Father. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Spasitas Christos. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Okay, that's a side chat. Call in live. You can do that with the in the blue membership button. It should, I'm on Brave, which is basically based off Chrome. So it should on YouTube just be a button that says join right next to subscribe. It doesn't say membership, it just says join. Okay. Let me see. No join button. Are you logged into YouTube? Because if you're not logged into YouTube, it won't work. So if you use something that keeps you out of, because it's a YouTube to the YouTube membership is specifically a YouTube platform feature. It's also important to note that I do appreciate people. That's weird. I'm gonna check on mine. Give me a second. I've never heard that. I will mention that stuff like super chats, if you wonder why I don't bring them up as much, or memberships, it's because frankly, you have to make at least $100 a month in order to get anything. And so I'm actually not even at that level. So it doesn't get to me. None of that has gotten to me yet. I imagine it will. Let me take a look. I'm actually looking on my phone.
So I stole all of this money for the rich to give to you.
Okay. So I'm going to take a look to see what it looks like on the app, because that surprises me. Okay, so let's say I click on this thing. So I'm going to take a look to see what. Let me see here. Okay. I see. Okay, so if it's on the phone, I don't know how to. Huh. In that case, I don't. Wait. Okay. In that case, the way you would do it is if you're on the phone app, there is there's like what looks like a little currency icon next to the chat button, and if you click on that, membership is the third option. Yeah, I know. I don't know these stupid ads. That's why I don't like running the YouTube app. I usually use Brave on my phone to avoid the ads. Although now the ads are becoming unavoidable, even on Brave. So that's, I'm seeing ads in YouTube Shorts. So not even sure what to say about that. As always, this is it's an open Q&A we do every Sunday, where, your questions, comments, thoughts, complaints, want to tell me that I'm a heretic, etc., go ahead and try. It's fine. Yeah, just super chats and stickers. I don't know. I don't that sounds really weird. Okay, well, I don't. The problem is the Opera has so much bloatware in it, and it's closed source, so I don't really know what they're recording, etc. That's the big problem I have with Opera. But I used to love Opera. It used to be one of my favorite browsers, just because it had a working notepad inside of it. But in any case, not today. So basically, what we're doing here, we always look for people. If they want to join the stream, you can just click on the link in blue at the top of the chat. Let me see here. What else is new? Well, it's as always, if you're wondering why I'd be concerned for even a small amount of support, and I do appreciate it in the memberships, it is because we are at bill season, and so now everything has gone crazy. I've gotten back the car and immediately was stopped by a police officer and told that my registration had expired. So that was bad. On another note, I've learned that more than half the country doesn't have to have a registration, and more than half the country doesn't have to have an emissions test, and more than half the country doesn't have to have inspections, and we have to have all three. So, yeah, Vivaldi really is the new opera. Yeah, I know that's still too big though. I don't trust it. Opera does have 7 separate builds. Yeah, it is more private than Mozilla. Mozilla Firefox, in my opinion, I have the lowest respect for. They kicked out Brendan Eich because of a political question, and at that point, I said I'm never using Firefox again. That to me, it's not just about the fact that I didn't like the ideology being pushed. It's also because they threw away the guy who invented JavaScript over it. Like, wow. Yeah, that's true. That is very, very true. XMR, for those who don't know, is a cryptocurrency. I do have crypto addresses. If you want to send me crypto, I will gladly take it because, as I mentioned, I got stopped. The registration was off. So I have to get that done before the inspection tomorrow because I need to get the car inspected. And then after I get that inspected, God willing, everything will be good with the car. Then I can go back to the court and I can clear out the last ticket because I have just received something from PennDOT telling me that my license is going to be suspended again over a ticket that I'm pretty sure I paid, but PennDOT doesn't care. So that I'll put it this way: if it has not been for your support over the past 6 to 7 months, I'm pretty sure I would be, I don't know, maybe homeless and in jail, or not in jail. I mean, unless I had to, shank a man or something. I don't think so. But the point is that, I obviously wouldn't do that. But the point is that, yeah, so we really do take your support seriously. I know that it was mentioned that I do have an idea when it comes to incense in mind. That is true, but I kind of had a couple of weeks for lead time on that. But that is really for the people who are on the fence. Very true. Mozilla is dead to me as well. Thank you, Reader John. I will say that, ultimately, getting the incense thing set up, and that's really, trying to more, have some kind of service to offer for people who just don't want to say throw money at the guy on the screen. Yeah, I understand. And incense is useful. I don't know if it'll pay all the bills, no idea, but we'll find out. Saba says Pennsylvania sounds rough. We need registrations here in Louisiana, but no inspections, thankfully. I did know that because I looked at all 50 states this weekend after getting stopped by the police officer and thought, wow, I live in really one of the worst areas. There's like this big northeastern tip where you have to have all these things for your car inspected, redone on a regular basis, either half a year or a full year. Some places it's a half a year. I think actually in Louisiana, from what I understand, New Orleans, you do have to have inspections like twice a year or something. But outside of that, you don't. But yeah, so it's pretty awful. But then, of course, with that, I did also get a note from the car's insurance company because I have to cover the insurance and my phone company. So I've been just hammered with a lot of bills all of a sudden. But anyway, thank God we did get the car repaired, which was almost $1,000. I know if it sounds like I'm talking a lot about money, it's because it's kind of on my mind. Also, nobody's given me a question yet. I mean, we need questions. It's a question and comment show, a question and answer show. We need those. They'll be getting rid of brake tags here in Louisiana soon, God willing. Absolutely. The more, the better. The more stuff they get rid of, the better. I learned, I cut my teeth driving in Florida. Florida still does not have any of these things. We have them in Texas, but it's basically to make sure your lights and blinkers work. Yes, Father, that's kind of one of them. That inspection is actually the one that I needed the repair for because the physical underside of the car, I guess the rockers were somewhat rusted, so they were just like, nope, this won't pass. But then they also have an emissions test to make sure that your car is not blowing out massive amounts of carbon monoxide. And so, yeah, that's why we have that. And then, of course, there's just the registration, which I don't really understand at all. You just hear it's a year, every year you pay a fee to own a car, I guess. Athanasios writes, "Blessings, Father. I have a question. In your opinion, what should be changed or done in true Orthodox apologetics to reach more people?" Wow. I like that question. That's an interesting one. The biggest thing that needs to be changed in true Orthodox apologetics is the circular firing squad. And what I mean is, most of us have historically, and this is getting better of late, have historically been best aimed at pointing our guns at each other. And that's stupid. That's unproductive. It has done nothing good. If there are political issues between the bishops, palace intrigue, we don't have to be a part of it. I mean, now I do because I'm a priest, but I didn't have to be a part of it when I was a layperson, more so when I was a deacon. But the point is that really I've seen more people argue in true Orthodoxy about intra-true Orthodox polemics than dealing with Roman Catholics, dealing with atheists, dealing with Protestants, dealing with Muslims. We need to focus on the heterodox and stop focusing on which particular party is the most right. Okay, well, I did ask for questions. Here comes. Are there any old believer, old right churches in communion with true Orthodox? The simple answer is no, not any bodies, because they kind of don't have that. Okay, who's this? Let's see what we got here. All right, hold on. Okay, that you need to connect. I don't know. You need to connect your mic. How do you hold on? Hold on. Okay, one moment. You need to connect mic and camera. Somebody's coming into the chat. To answer that question, to be honest, no, there isn't. There may be old believer, old right parishes in Russia, since I know that a lot of them kind of eased up on the old believer stuff, or I should say old right stuff, because if you're an old believer, you're just kind of a weird heretic. So no, apologies. I'm sure that they could join, but usually they're so focused on just their five-finger sign of the cross and these minor liturgical issues that they'll even join Roman Catholics if that gets approved. We've seen that. I don't know, but there's one in communion with Rome for some reason. Yeah, that's my point. They're so obsessed with externals, they're willing to join the Roman Catholics to keep them. I don't know if it's still around, but that did exist in the late 2000s until at least 2010. Yeah, sure. That's true. Refined Canine, there is one group claiming they're old believers in communion with Rome, but Rome doesn't even recognize them. It's basically a Sede Vagrant group with an old right priest. I have no idea. Father Bless, good evening from Texas. God bless you. I think the last Staroversky who were in communion with Rome were likely killed by the Soviets in the 30s and 40s. It would not surprise me. Are they actually Sedevacantists, or do they recognize Francis like the SSPX? Probably, no idea. I don't know who they are. Thank you, Father. No problem. And it's I think their bishop is of the the Thuk line. Okay, and they're just vagrants. The Thuk line is one of these Sedevacantist lineages that came out in the 80s. So basically weird group. Someone did try to join. If you'd like to try to join again, please do. It will work. It's just that if the mic and camera access is not allowed, it won't let you on. So Monk Simeon, if you want to try again, feel free. Let me see here. Thoughts on Pope Francis reclaiming the title Patriarch in the West? Strangely enough, I don't have any thoughts on it. That has been a traditional papal title for 1,700 years. It was only Benedict the 16th, the previous one, who took it off. But now everyone's like, oh, he put it back on. There's an agenda. I mean, it was like taken off for ecumenical reasons, and now it's being put back on for ecumenical reasons. That doesn't sound it doesn't quite make sense to me. Pronounced took. Okay. I said took. Okay. Took. Okay. I mean, that's fine. You go to a Took line church. Well, what you need to do is go to an Orthodox church. DTC unity with Rome is coming. That's what it means. Well, it hasn't meant that for the past, to 2023 years. I mean, why should it mean that now? What he took off a title 5 years ago, puts it back on, this month. It means nothing. Just curious, do you go to the CRMRI? Okay. Yeah, that's a Roman Catholic group. The last pope having been the one to stop using the term is funny. Well, yeah, considering this was literally a few years ago. It's not a big deal. Nathan Duke was consecrating bishops even in the 1970s. He literally consecrated hundreds of people as bishops. I don't doubt it. I know he was doing it as late as the 80s. I don't know enough about them, and if we're being completely honest, it doesn't matter. They're definitely Roman Catholics. If they're not recognized by the Pope, I don't care, because they still have the same exact mindset as the recognized ones when it comes to the papacy. All right, hold on. We have hello. When it comes to the papacy. All right, hold on. We have can you hear me? Okay. Can you hear me? Okay, you're in the chat, but you're not saying anything.
Oh, yes, Father, I'm here.
Hi there. And you are a monk Simeon. Hi, Father. How are you doing today?
I'm fine, Father.
So what's your question?
I'm fine.
You're kind of reverbing a little bit.
Yeah, I got the television on too.
Well, I guess all right. Well, so what's your question or comment or thought?
Let me try to get the TV off.
Not a problem.
All right, fun. I don't have any really. Just Father Vladika Enoch's not on today.
He said I did talk to him. There was an ordination today, so he said he might be a little bit late. And so yeah, he God willing he will be on. So if you're looking to talk to Bishop Enoch, I give it maybe another 20 minutes or so. God willing, he should be on. He said he was going to run late today. Did you have any questions for me?
No question. I just enjoy hearing him. You're on here all the time, and he's not all here all the time.
No, he's not. He's busy. He's a bishop.
Yeah.
I do the regular thing, and sometimes we have Bishop Enoch on. Sometimes Father Boniface comes on. Sometimes we have anyone can come on, because the Sunday night show, there's no filter. We're looking. You want to be a papist, heretic, or a Muslim? You want to challenge us? That's what we're here for. But none of them ever call. I don't know why. I think.
Can you share who he's bringing into the church or ordaining or whatever it was?
Oh yeah, no. The ordination was today. We have a new priest in Nova Scotia. Oh. Everybody, Nova Scotia, Canada. And his name is Father Raphael. I don't have all the details.
Yeah.
Because I don't live at the Abbey. But the point is that from what I understand, it should be on the website either tonight or tomorrow. So it's. It's like you heard it here first, but it's not a big gotcha.
Yeah. Well, I heard it last week, but yeah.
All right. Well, and let me see here while I go through some of these comments. The Took line, I don't really get that stuff. Okay, and yep, this is more Took line. Oh, the Palmarians. Okay. In regards to the Western Rite, do we have manuscript evidence of the epiclesis in the first millennium? There's so much interest in this epiclesis question. I don't know why. I mean, I do know why. I mean, as I explained it in the Discord chat, quite frankly, it's all because people want to hold on to their, whatever remnants of papism they have, when a legitimate Western Rite doesn't make that necessary. Do we have manuscript evidence of the epiclesis? We have manuscript evidence of various epicleses in the Roman Rite. There were a number of them. In the Mozarabic Rite, there were a number of them. In a number of other Western rites, almost all of them, there were evidence of epicleses. What there weren't evidence of was that they were in the canon, but they were still in the collects, which meant that they might be there one week, or most weeks, to be honest, but they might not be there some weeks. Because back then, the understanding of the consecration was that the entire canon was what brings the communion together. Now, the real reason, as I mentioned this, and I'm sure that's not why you're asking, I'm sure somebody had mentioned it to you and you're legitimately curious, is because of the fact that people who come into the Western Rite from Roman Catholicism often want to bring as much of their Roman Catholicism in with them. And in Roman Catholicism, there's a bit of an obsession with the whole, like, when the Eucharist is consecrated because of a bunch of auxiliary beliefs, like, you know, the gaze that saves, that if the priest raises the host, then if you say an act of faith, hope, and contrition, you get purgatory points, or you get purgatory points for staring at the host in a monstrance. I know that sounds a little bit irreverent, but the truth is I'm being totally factual about purgatory points. I can call them indulgences, but it's so much more fun to call them purgatory points. And the point is that ultimately that's the real reason they're so obsessed about the epiclesis, because their whole purgatory points game is ruined. I mean, if you don't get the magic purgatory points from the staring at the monstrance, and you don't get the magic purgatory points from saying the special prayers when the priest raises the Eucharist, then, you know, where's the fun in that? Well, the fun in it is that you're not supposed to be doing that. You're supposed to be preparing to receive the body and blood of Christ, not this ridiculous stuff. So that's why I say that the epiclesis question, in all honesty, it's one line that is not uttered out loud. Honestly, no people should legitimately have a reason to care, especially if it came from a pre-schism Western Rite. Then you really have no reason to care. But thank you for the question. I know he did weird stuff, but if it's valid, that's all that matters. I don't know what you guys are talking about anymore. By Orthodox and RCC standards, what he did wasn't valid. No idea. I assume this is still about the Took line. Bishops don't have magic hands and can't just consecrate whoever they want just because they feel like it. Okay. I have a question for monk Father Simeon. What monastery is he at? I know a few Father Simeons, so I wonder if I've met him before. There are a lot of Father Simeons in the U.S. Tell us about yourself, Father.
Well, you know me, Father Simeon of Syracuse.
Oh, shoot. Oh, wow. Wow, we go way back. It hasn't always been friendly, but I've known you for a while. Okay, well, that's cool. Well, nice to meet you. I don't think we haven't spoken in
many
16,
years.
17 years. Yeah, it's been a long time. Wow. How are you doing, Father?
I'm considering my disabilities. I'm well.
Oh God, thank God.
To answer the question, St. Michael's Cell, or the Sacred Cell of the Holy Archangel Michael in Syracuse.
Is that still under ROCOR MP?
No, that's still under Metropolitan John.
Oh, well, last I checked, you're still on the ROCOR MP directory.
Well, I'm probably everywhere. I just don't erase anything.
Well, that wasn't your job. You don't run the website.
Oh,
but
okay.
in any case, congratulations. Thank you for coming back under. Well, I'm not. Thank you. I mean, God be praised. You're back under the Metropolitan. That's great.
I wasn't in ROCOR that long because they were so political, and I run up against a brick wall, and Vladika Hilarion says, "Join a monastery or get out."
Wow. Nice.
Yep. So.
Are you still doing the hermitage thing? Are you considering moving to the Abbey, or are you gonna stay and kind of do what you were doing?
I'm here hermitaging in Syracuse.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. Well, hopefully, I'm glad. I hope they, you come down to say hello. It'd be great. I'm glad to hear that you're back. Oh, when did you come?
I don't know. Now you're gonna have to ask Father Vladika Enoch. 2 months ago, maybe. It wasn't that long ago.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
I didn't hear a thing. I wanted to try to reach out to you a while back. I forget why. I think it was because there might have been. Were you? I saw it looked like it was a comment on Orthodox tradition. The Q site said, the one run by Metropolitan Demetrius, and I saw someone using your name, but I wasn't sure if it was you, and I was like, uh-oh. But then I didn't know that you were part of our church. No one told me anything. But then again, you have to understand that organizationally, how do I put this? It's messy.
Low man on totem pole.
Yeah. Well, low man on the totem pole. I thought you said low main, which makes a lot more sense in terms of how we're organized, because that's really where we're going with this. It's just that's kind of much more. Hold on. Hello, Father. Forgive me being late. Your blessings, Father. No problem. God bless you. It was an interesting experience. Okay. There's more Roman Catholic stuff. Okay. Yes. Yes. That's okay. That's good. Interesting route. I've seen that one before. Okay. And I'm looking for questions. Father, what are your thoughts on the Western captivity? It's all made up. That's my thoughts on it. The whole thing. I think it's over exaggerated. A lot of it is inconsistent. Once you start looking at it, it's just all made up. So, okay. So, well, that's good to know. I'm glad that you're back with our synod. I don't have. Did you? I mean, I assume you want to be. Should we? Now I feel I feel kind of embarrassed. I'm going to be honest.
Why?
Because I didn't know. And so if I had known, for example, like we try to put everyone on the directory and I
Well,
no, I'm kind of embarrassed. I feel
I don't
really
think
embarrassed.
everybody's on that directory, Father.
No, I just found out that a priest we had for 2 years wasn't on the directory. I had to add him on myself. I was like, wow, okay, we really need to work on this.
And sometimes they probably prefer not to be, just to be. If they're not evangelizing, then probably won't be left alone. Especially if they're like me, for instance. I can't take visitors unless they make an appointment. So it's because my situation is not for that. So.
Okay, well that makes sense then. I mean, well, if you want to just let me know and I will, or let Bishop Enoch know because he runs the website too. But yeah, that's fine. I honestly had no clue as to whether you were in our synod or not, and so I apologize.
Throw me your email.
Here's Bishop Enoch. Okay, hold on. Benedicite.
Benedicite.
We have Father Simeon on from Syracuse.
Oh, hello, Father Simeon. God bless. Hello.
I don't know.
Father Boniface says good evening. Maybe we can get him on too. Anyway, I have no idea. That's the other thing. My StreamYard bill. I don't know if I can have more than 3 people on. Hopefully, I can. Let's find out.
Well, we have had like 5 people in the past. Like
but that's because I've been paying a monthly. You have to pay a monthly stream for that.
Okay.
You have to pay a monthly fee for that. I think it's like $27.
Well, now I got to set my camera up.
Yep.
Let me see if I can find it. All right, I'm only going to be on for 30 minutes. So what are we going to talk about?
Oh, well, tell us. You can actually tell us about the new ordination. Since I was just talking about that.
There was a former. There's an ordination today for hieromonk Raphael.
Okay.
And he has, just to give a little bit of his past, he's from Canada, from Nova Scotia. He from about 100 miles from Halifax. He lives in a town called Bridgetown.
Okay.
And he had been raised in the Anglican Church of Canada. He left after the women's ordination stuff happened, as did a lot of people. And initially he went to the OCA. I think this was in the 90s or something, or maybe the late 80s. And he became a monk in the OCA. And then I guess he was still interested, from what he tells me, and he's told Vladika and Bishop Lazar and Western Rite. That wasn't too well thought of in the OCA, obviously. And I suppose once you're in sort of like the OCA and the Greek Archdiocese, what have you, in these areas, it's not going to be too long before ecumenism starts eating away at your whole concept of conversion to begin with.
I see.
So you begin to think, well, what was the point in doing this if we're saying that, like Roman Catholics are part of the church and all this other stuff? So he eventually left and became a continuing Anglican because he thought, well, why would I be an Eastern Rite Anglican when I could be a Western Rite Anglican? But he did come into contact with our Bishop Lazar and some of our other people. And we have been talking to him for some time, and we basically talked to him and said, look, your original decision was that you intended to be Orthodox, although we wouldn't accept the OCA as properly reflecting that, obviously.
Your original decision that you
And
Hi, Father.
and then
Benedict
Father
Day.
Boniface.
Benedici Day.
And so we finally got him up here, down here, and received him through baptism, chrismation. I gave him the minor orders on last Thursday and Friday, and I ordained him a deacon on Saturday, and Vladika John was able to ordain him a priest at the Mass this Sunday. So he will be working with our Bishop, with us, but also with our Bishop Lazar in Canada. Andrew, who's a longtime friend of ours for several years, has basically been up in Canada, and Ray up there in Canada. It turns out, has been trying to.
Yeah, he'll finally be able to drive over. Yeah.
He'll finally be able to get baptized by one of our priests, and because he lives only about 48 miles, if in a straight way, if you could, from Father Raphael at his would be Hermitage of St. Cuthbert. So we'll try to get pictures of that on the website and information and such. And
Yeah,
I think
definitely.
this reflects on a wider strategy that I think we've talked about for years, and that's to try to find a way to put priest in like strategic locations. So maybe there's never a 200 to 300 mile area where there's not at least some priest within, both ways. You don't have to be every, if you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, exactly.
If you did that, you could theoretically maybe cover North America and the populated sections of Canada with maybe 20 priests. All right.
Yeah.
If you could find a way to get them in those positions. Yes.
Yeah.
So that's basically what we're hoping to continue to do. So we've been going over a lot of material with him and, retraining and everything. Everything is working out very well. And, we loaded him up with books. Father Simeon recently sent us his old edition of the Epistle and Gospel book, the companion.
Oh, really?
We got that in the mail.
Oh,
so
cool.
I made that a gift to Father Raphael, so he'll have an Epistle and a Gospel book. So that works out for, I think, thankfully, he sent that. And
any chance you copied it so we can start printing a new Epistle and Gospel book?
The problem is that we don't necessarily have the copyright to that.
Oh, okay. So this
Aiden,
one, I thought it. Okay,
that's
the Father
that's
Aiden edition.
yeah.
Okay.
So that's that's a little bit. I don't know what the issue is on that, so I don't want to go down that route.
All right. So no, I noticed that because of all the comments with the Latin Mass stuff, keep in mind Father Raphael is Western, right? So if you're in that Canada, Nova Scotia area and you want to go there, it's available to you.
It's going to be in English though. So
that's that. Well, yeah, we generally do Western right in English.
Yes.
Okay, this is the first. We have a few questions. Father, what is your opinion of the book, His Broken Body, Understanding and Healing the Schism Between the Roman Catholic and Eastern Churches?
I'm familiar with the book.
Oh, please opine on it, because
I'm not. Okay, I'm familiar with it. I've read sections of it on Google Books, but I haven't been able to read the whole section. So I've read like 100 pages altogether over the past few years. And he makes his ultimate point is of course ecumenistic heresy.
Yeah,
which is unacceptable. I mean, that's the ultimate problem. But what is true is that in the early sections of the book, when he talks about like the 4th and 5th and 6th centuries, he does make some points that figures like St. Meletius of Antioch, when he was the president of the Second Ecumenical Council, actually died out of communion with the papacy. Yeah. And that I think this Father Laurent is a Roman Catholic. And
no, he's OCA.
He's OCA. Okay, so he's okay. But obviously, that makes it that denies the Roman, central aspect of ultramontanism.
Yeah,
the decision of the Pope saying that you have to have communion with the Roman See to have salvation or be part of the Church. Well, obviously, Saint Meletius wasn't in communion with the Roman See even when it was Orthodox because of various circumstances. All right. In fact, the position of the Church of Rome in 381 was that Saint Meletius was in fact schismatic. They did not accept his ordination. They even claimed he was They even claimed he was basically a fraud of some sort, and he was really an Arian. I mean, and what have you. So I think for this, I think there were some interesting and good historical examples he gives in the early period. But the problem is that these ultimately can't be used to service the false ideology of ecumenism. Because in the case of Saint Meletius and let's say Pope Saint Damasus, they both held the Orthodox faith. It's just Saint Meletius have been slandered, and his bishops have been slandered and lied about for decades. All right, so
I get that.
So you had one Orthodox bishop or groups of Orthodox bishops in Italy and Egypt simply, making, for lack of a better word, bad decisions in regards to the case of the Syrian church and Saint Meletius' clergy. Even to the point where, remember, Italy's man in Syria, Paulinus of Antioch, their clergy went about claiming they had to rebaptize everybody baptized by Saint Meletius. They reordained them, and now eventually that segment got pushed, got kicked out because there was too many complaints about that, and they became like what we'll call the Luciferian schismatics, led by Lucifer Cagliari and such. But anyway, so I'm familiar with the book, and there are some interesting examples in it, but I think it's not a
it's an humanist book, and that's
the end thesis is the problem. It's just like there's this Father Christian Capps, who is a Uniate Roman Catholic, and he writes some actually interesting material. He wrote an interesting book I read about 2 years ago, called "The Epiclesis and the Council of Florence," and he makes some interesting points where he brings up that at the Council of Florence, Sylvester Syropoulos, who was one of the Orthodox delegates. He was a layman. He was an imperial official, but he was a very educated man. Yeah. And some of the bishops basically confronted Pope Eugene, because Eugene was like, well, we don't have an epiclesis in the Roman canon. And they said, au contraire, you actually do. It's called Supplices Te Regamus. All right. And for a long time, people, and like Eugene didn't like that. The Roman Catholics didn't like that. And they, in fact, had just enough research on the Orthodox side that some of them brought up the fact that St. Paschasius Radbertus in the 840s taught that it was the narration of institution and the invocation for the Supplices Te, which he interpreted as an epiclesis, that affected the consecration, which through the whole discussion, my point is that this, Father Christian Capps makes some good points, but ultimately the book is marred, just like these other books, by an overarching theme, which is trying to reconcile the irreconcilable, all right? Yep. Orthodoxy and papism. And they can give a lot of credit to orthodoxy, but ultimately they're siding with some sort of heresy in the end. Yep. And even if 80% of the book was great, there's that 20%, unfortunately, just mars it and creates all kinds of problems and such. So that's what I think. I mean, I don't want to give too much of a review. I haven't read the entirety book, but that was my understanding for reading Kleinwerk's work, especially the last chapter, I think.
Okay. Well, that makes a lot of sense. I have not read the book. I don't know. Father Boniface, have you read that book or no?
No.
Okay. Father Simeon? No. Okay. Your mic's off. Anyway, no problem. So yeah, I think that. So yeah, your review is going to stand, Vladika, because frankly, I don't think
it's a partial review based off reading about 120 pages or something like that. So that's all it is.
That's fair. So let's continue on. And Father Boniface, because you just popped on,
yes,
have any opening thoughts for today?
Nothing offhand. Just amazed at let's say the present time of Lent, and the edification that I'm getting in the liturgy, and more growth in my understanding of the Blessed Mother. Just really fantastic. The liturgy is a teacher, and so I'm just enjoying that. Continuing to work on the house and talk about the orthodoxy every chance I get. And so.
Cool.
Aside of looking at the news in the outside world and watching all the chaos. so anyway.
All right. Well, that's great. I'm glad to hear that it's going well, and we're always happy to have you on the show. The time to let's get to some questions and comments. Diocesan Latin Mass is so bizarre. There's a diocesan. Okay, yeah, that's true. It can be. Very bizarre place. Well, I think I read these. I have a question for the stream forwarded to me by Ezekiel. He's asking for the Beginner's Guide to Apologetics Against Papists. What are some good resources for him?
Father Vladimir Guitte's book comes to mind.
The Papacy is a fantastic starter text, especially if you follow the footnotes to those books and read the full context of the statements in which they're made. You'll get a world-class apologetical education against papists that way. Let me see here. Even my TLM isn't a I know. Okay. Today is Latin Mass Day, I guess. An argument, and let me see here. They believe in eternal Rome. Good to see Father Boniface. Yes, I'm sure Sava was actually at Father Boniface's hermitage like last week or the week before. So
Yeah.
very nice times. Watching this double speed to catch up, I've actually seen some Sensus Fidelium video where the priest completely seriously refers to paying off purgatory points. Haha. Yeah, no, that's a thing. Indulgences are a real thing. The plenary, they haven't gone away.
Father Joseph, can you explain? This is something I've constantly had contradictory information about.
Sure.
You remember they used to be. They may still do. They used to be these crosses the Vatican gave out, and they used to say that if you kiss the cross, these crosses that were blessed by the Pope before, like, you died, you would have like 300 years off purgatory. Right. My question is this: I've also heard people say that, well, it's not just kissing the cross, and there's some other complex procedure that has to go with it. Now, you know what I'm talking about?
There's what you're talking about are pre and post Vatican II understandings of indulgences. Now, it's important to remember that post Vatican II understandings of indulgences have not actually changed in terms of the teaching and theory behind them. All that's changed is the practices. So before Vatican II, they had collected loads of indulgences over the centuries for doing various things. The Stations of the Cross, doing the Rosary every day, wearing
supererogatory merits and the Treasury of the Saints.
Right. None of that stuff changed, but Vatican II made it a lot simpler. So they wanted to take out a lot of the crazier ones that would make people look like absolute lunatics and reduce it to going to Jerusalem does the plenary indulgence, things like that. So they didn't change the teaching, but they did simplify the practice. So you might meet an older Roman Catholic who will be like, no, it's not. You have to do this and this and this and this because that's the way it was taught. And that's probably still allowed. From what I understand, the old indulgences weren't abrogated. They just created a bunch of simpler ones so people wouldn't freak out.
I was reading a few years ago. I'll let everybody get in on this if they want to. About 10 years ago, there was a book, or 15 years ago, a book by Eamon Duffy. He was a Roman Catholic, but he wrote an interesting book called The Stripping of the Altars, about the Reformation in England. And in it, he talks about, like, in around 1500, there was an indulgence granted by the Roman Catholic Archbishop of Canterbury that granted 50 million years off purgatory. And it was a serious document. They seemed to have believed people were going to spend that you could just simply sign the text and there would be, you gave a certain amount of money to build a cathedral and there's 50 million years.
Yeah.
So
before Vatican II, that was very common. What I would say is that after Vatican II, they realized having something like 50 million years on an indulgence looks bad. So what they did is they started saying those are plenary indulgences. So in other words, at the time you get the indulgence, that counts like it's all of it. So instead of it, that way you wouldn't have like the 175 years out of purgatory points, or it was just a year or less or a complete and total one, because it looked so bad. It just was embarrassing. I don't know. Father Simeon, you look like you were going to say something.
Well, I was wondering if there's a papal accountant to keep track of all these indulgences.
Yeah, that's
the treasurer of the merits of the saints.
The treasurer of merits.
Also, I wasn't aware that eternity kept track of time.
Yeah, because that was my impression, because it almost seemed to be they had this idea that when someone's in purgatory, that's what it seemed to be, that maybe like time is a lot slower there. So, or 1 day in purgatory is equal to 1 day on earth is like equal to 1,000,000 years in purgatory or something like it. Was
that sounds to me like evolutionary purgatory.
Yeah, day age purgatory.
It wasn't like that purgatory before, though. It became this purgatory eventually. So
after Darwin.
Yeah, exactly. Now it used to be a much uglier purgatory. Now it's a much nicer looking purgatory.
Well, if you read, and if you read Dante's Divine Comedy, and
See,
you'd read his version of purgatory, it's a lot different. Like his version of purgatory is like sort of this mountain you climb up, and it's a lot different than purgatory as sort of like, to be frank, like the older the notion that the soul suffering in the flames,
right.
such like that, and what have you. So there were all kinds of various notions of that. So.
Well,
I'm not meaning to.
That was the prehistoric.
Well, I'm not meaning to go to. Obviously, the Orthodox. If you read like Orthodox dogmatic texts that deal with this, like it's not that the Orthodoxy objected to that there was a state, but the difference is that the state of those who were prayed for that are who die, as Synod of Jerusalem says, there are people who die repentant but with not brought forth works worthy of repentance. All right, sort of deathbed conversions. And that in some cases those people are remanded to Hades, but we don't view Hades as there's not a Hades, a purgatory, and then a paradise and such. And there's no general mention in Orthodox text that that suffering in the upper levels of Hades, because Hades just means that realm of the dead. That's not paradise. All right. There's no mention that it's the suffering that brings about catharsis. It's divine compassion, divine love, and mercy that is preyed upon them, and God, heals them and then translates them to paradise at some point. Obviously, that doesn't mean someone can just that's for Orthodox Christians who pass repose. Obviously, no one's saying that you can just pray people out of hell. Even though there are some cases of obviously Saint Gregory the Great praying for the Emperor Trajan and such. Although
these are exceptions.
And Saint Macarius of Egypt and such, but those are always taken to be these exceptions. It's sort of like the Scripture says it's appointed to man once to die and then the judgment. But that doesn't mean that. Well, obviously, Lazarus died and then he got resurrected. He got raised from the dead, and then he died later on. Okay, and there are exceptions to the rule, but you should never count on yourself being the exception to the rule. Yeah. All right. Because that proves you're sort of have this prideful attitude. All right. Yeah. So.
Okay. So we got. Let's see here. Another weird one. The diocesan Latin Mass parish have relics of the new martyr Elizabeth, Grand Duchess, and nun. No idea how they got a hold of them. Yeah, we don't either. My only
Patriarchate gives relics in ecumenical exchanges.
Oh wow, that's actually horrible. I was sad that you hear that. Bois, Father, just one more question. Sorry for asking too much. What do you think about S.A. Nihilus? Sergei Nihilus was, he was a pious Orthodox Christian. I realize people are like, but the protocols, and then people are like, forgery. But he did also publish the conversation of, with St. Seraphim Motovilov, just like you made that note, and people are doubting the authenticity of it. This shows you the evil of turning on Orthodox people of the past, because sometimes the motivations for why they did something weren't as evil as modern society, particularly non-Christian modern society, might view these people.
Now, my understanding is I think he translated the protocols into Russian. I don't know if he actually composed them. In fact,
but that's what they imply. Yeah, they imply because he translated them. We know that. But the whole point is,
because obviously I do know, like St. Nicholas the Tsar didn't believe the protocols were authentic, but he did believe that whoever wrote it, obviously, it was almost more like a parable. There were, obviously things in it about, globalism and things that came about, even if obviously with the fabrication. But Sergei Nihilus was horribly tortured by the Soviet authorities in the 1920s for being Orthodox Christian. He was staying at one of the skeets at one point, and they just dragged him out. He had a bad heart. They were trying to get him to have a heart attack constantly. Now he finally died of a heart attack. And one of the ways the Soviets in the 1920s dealt with people is that they might torture you terribly, beat you up, and then starve you and what have you. And then when they see you're really sick and they know you're going to die, they don't want you dying in custody, because then that looks bad. So then they let you go. You go home and you die maybe a few weeks later.
Yep.
All right. So he did suffer terribly for the Orthodox faith. Okay. And you'd have to ask, what would be his rationale for just making, up the conversation of St. Seraphim with Motovilov? I mean, why didn't he just, if he was that terrible of a person, the fraudster, you might say, why would he endure, years of brutal torture by the Soviet regime when he could have just, enjoyed a good life by, there were many people, by the way, who in the 1920s, when they got tortured, even clergy, denounced the Orthodox faith. They didn't just go to renovationism. They denounced it. They were given well-paying jobs, professors of atheism kind of stuff. All right, like I think there was a famous case in the 50s of this one MP priest who like had these deconversion, to be atheist, and he became professor of scientific atheism at Leningrad or something like that. They rewarded that stuff. All right. So I mean, you'd have to see what information is it just because it's serif? Is just because it's nihilist that they doubt it?
That's what the implication seems to be, which is a really bad implication. I think, if people I think more people in that case, really are hating concepts more than they are loving people. Gregory de Coplette is convinced J. Nihilus is a saint. I haven't seen any evidence to suggest he was a heretic or such. I don't really know. Maybe that's his position. Machka Stephanie asks, Father Boniface, what's for supper this evening?
I already ate it, so I had my fish. Okay. Fried onions and let me see, plantain bananas fried in oil.
Nice.
See, so anyway,
that's going to be a regular thing. We're going to have to know what's for dinner.
Yeah. Okay.
Reader John.
Well, then they'll just have to come down and enjoy the cuisine.
Hey, why not? It'll work for Stava. Reader John says, glad to see Monk Simeon of Syracuse. Atomic Lead said, papism can be anything I want it to be. You can be a Monothelite, Nestorian, Palamite, Monophysite, as long as you're. That's absolutely true. A Protestant and what do you call those? The Pentecostals. They've got them all. As long as you, as long as you put it in, as long as you're in communion with Rome, they don't care.
Now you remember, and people forget this. When I used to be on Facebook, I had we started the Apologetics War Room.
Yeah.
And then we created another one. I don't know. Anyway,
the War Zone. Yeah.
On one of those, I can't remember which one became the more dominant. But anyway, whatever the case is, there was a discussion we had about like the Nestorian issue in Rome. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I pointed out, or someone else pointed out, or I mentioned something about it, was that up until like 1904, the Chaldean Unia Church, all right, which were basically former Nestorians who joined Rome when they had to accept Chalcedon, etc.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. And Ephesus and the papacy, etc. They were only allowed to use a modified form of what was called the Liturgy of Adai Mare. Okay. And it had to have words of institution and such. Anyway,
they had to add the words of institution because they weren't there.
Yes. So, but what's interesting is they were not allowed to use what we call the anaphoras of Nestorius or the anaphora of Theodore Mopsuestia, because obviously those are two condemned heretics. Well, in 1904, now 1905, or between 1905 and 1910, I believe, the papacy actually allowed the Chaldean Uniates to use the anaphoras of Nestorius and Theodore, but they had to call it like anaphora B and anaphora C or something.
Right.
But why did they allow that after so long opposing it? Well, it's because in Persia and in Iraq, the Russian Orthodox Church took in something like a few hundred thousand, or at least almost 100,000 Nestorians converted to Orthodoxy. And the Russian church was actually involved in negotiations with the Assyrian Patriarch, and some of the bishops were saying, well, I guess we're inclining to just formally accept Orthodoxy, all right, and get received into the church. And so the Vatican was like, oh, this is not a good thing because, only we're the ones that should be able to do this, all right? So they began to make all these other concessions to Nestorians, all right? And eventually gets to the point where nowadays you can be in the Chaldean Uniate Church and you can venerate Nestorius, all right? Because like a lot of Roman Catholics saying, oh, Nestorius was wrongly convicted. And how does that work out? Well, what they claim is that the Pope condemned what he thought Nestorius, like they will say Ephesus and the Pope condemned what they thought Nestorius said, but not what he actually believed.
Yeah.
So it's this weird, crazy rewriting of ecumenical councils, where ecumenical councils ultimately turn into condemning like phantoms almost, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. Right? There's like just the same thing happened with the ecumenism that's going on with Monophysitism, all right? Where they'll say things like the church condemned Monophysitism, but Monophysitism was only an abstract concept and no one ever embraced or something like that. Right? So it makes this strange mockery of history, as if nobody understood because and you remember for years people claimed that this was a linguistic difference. There were Syriac speakers and Greek speakers. Well, it turns out Nestorius didn't speak Syriac. He spoke Greek. He was a Greek.
Yeah.
All right. Theodore Mopsuestia was a Greek speaker. All right. The leaders of the Monophysites were for centuries actually just the Greek community in Alexandria, by the way. All right. And even the Coptic Church didn't adopt for up until like the 10th century. A lot of their liturgies were done entirely in Greek because they were simply a lot of them were Greek Monophysites that ruled over like a Coptic village majority. All right. So there was no linguistic difference. This is sort of this invented issue of 20th century ecumenism that ultimately rewrites history in this effort. It's just a terrible effort. Oh, I'm sorry, going too long. Okay, but
no, well, most of the stuff that you were saying was paralleling in the chat, so it worked out just fine. The only thing that kind of was not that related to that was actually this. What's the most recent dogmatic pan-Orthodox synod according to true Orthodoxy? Jerusalem 1672. I don't know, Vladika, you want to take that one?
I think it's generally accepted. There's not much that there are 18 decrees. I don't think there's anything the church has ever.
Well, I think he's asking, was there anything later than that?
There was a council in Constantinople, like in 1722. There were various general synods of regional churches that happened, but I think Jerusalem, which was a 672, which was originally meant to be held in Bethlehem, I'm not even sure how many bishops were there. I think there may have been like 30 Orthodox bishops there. And what happened is they sent the decrees around to the different churches. All right. And they were received by the different churches. The real reason Jerusalem was called was because of the aftermath of the Kyrillikaris stuff. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't. I'm sure there probably were some large gatherings in Constantinople. I think there was one in 1725 that condemned the Melkite schism.
Okay.
And such. But I can't think of anything immediately.
What about 1872?
1872? Well, you're right. There was a synod that condemned the Philatist heresy. That though, like Russia and Jerusalem and Antioch, they accepted the condemnation, but they didn't accept that all the Bulgarians were really guilty of what was being
right. Yeah, but I was just talking about
you're right. There was that. So that's perfectly valid and acceptable.
Okay, 1923, however, obviously.
Well, no. The 1923 is that Pan-Orthodox Council, the so-called Pan-Orthodox Council, where they
the Pan-Roberts Synod. Yeah.
In which Metron Anthony Kropivitsky was there for like a week or so, and then he realized, to his credit, what was going on, and he left. So obviously, there were people they were trying to reel in. That was the council that condemned Saint Tikhon and recognized the Living Church as the true Church of Russia. And I think that that was the case until like 1945, until finally, I think Khodrovsky died, or almost all the Living Church people were forced by the Soviet government to join the Moscow Patriarchate and such. Mm-hmm. So Thanar eventually, had to reconcile with this other creation of the Soviet government. So.
All right, so we have Reader John and Atomic Lead here. Feel free, either of you, if you want to say hello or if you have a question.
Good evening. Bless Vladika.
Lord bless.
I was hoping to long-time listener, first-time caller, as they say. I was since His Grace said his time is limited. I would, if I might, I would like to ask if I might pose a question while he's available this evening.
Okay, go ahead.
I was interested in something that it was mentioned on the previous stream from a few days ago about the relationship between Nestorianism and Pelagianism. Mm-hmm. Now, I know Father Joseph a few months ago was accused on Twitter of being a Hillite. Because what? Hillite. Jonathan Hill. There's a fellow on Twitter.
I've known Jonathan Hill for 10 years. I've more than 10 years. We don't talk. He's a nice guy, but I have nothing to do with him.
Yes, that was my assumption that the accusation was absurd. So one of the things that he actually does post about that I've been trying to find out more information on because it's relevant to the Orthodox and Papist controversies. Hill is adamant that the actual Orthodox teaching is that when we refer to the person of Christ from the incarnation on, that he is not just a divine person, but he's also a divine and human person because of both of the natures. Whereas I've had, anyone can find numerous papist sources saying that even after the incarnation, his person remains only divine, but we say that he has also a divine nature. So I've been wondering. This is something
I know what you're talking about. I'm familiar with that controversy.
Yes, because I'd like to, if I might, pick your Grace's brain on this about the specific any more details in this, because I know something that was mentioned on the introduction to True Orthodoxy stream hosted by the other Paul. It was mentioned that St. Justin Popovich thought that Papism was essentially a Pelagian religion because it had a deficient view of the fall and original sin. And
yes,
and I wanted to
that if you ever go on the asbica.ru website, I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Let's see if I put a link to it. Hold on.
You're going to have to find the library section. You're going to have to use Google Translate, and which thankfully has got a whole lot better with Russian. It's entirely readable. And if you look on there's the dogmatic, St. Justin Popovich's Dogmatics of the Orthodox Church, which he wrote in like 1960 or 1955 or something. And I think you're going to, I don't want to talk too much about that without rereading the section. All right. But I do recall that he viewed the scholastic notions of the fall as being Pelagianistic. All right. So, but as regards to the other question, I know St. John Damascene says Christ is a composite person. All right, he does use that phrase in the Orthodox dogmatic in his exact exposition of the Orthodox faith, and he's a composite person because the Logos, in the hypostatic union, unites the divine nature to the human nature. All right, I think what's happening is I recall somewhat of this debate years ago in some Facebook comments, where the argument is that the hypostasis of the Logos obviously has to take the place. There is no human there was no original human hypostasis, if you know what I mean, because there was no man that existed first, and then the union happened after that. All right. So my understanding is that I haven't been able to find a place, and I know where they exactly say something like Christ in an ecumenical council where they say that Christ is a divine human person hypostasis. I have not been able to find that phrase, but it seems like the terminology of composite person would lead to something like that. That's what I think. I'm very cagey here for a very good reason, because I don't want to make some statement,
certainly.
People misunderstand it. It's just like there was this book by this Greek archdiocese priest called Father Emmanuel Hagiscus or something, where he was like, he talks about what kind of human nature did Christ have. All right. And and when he wrote that book, he ended up getting accused of like the Julianist heresy. All right. Orthodocetism. All right. And if you read his book, it's quite unclear what he's actually talking about. And you can see, he denies he's teaching Orthodocetism. And Orthodocetism was his teaching by Julian Halicarnassus, who was a Monophysite bishop in the 500s, who said that our Lord's flesh was not inherently capable of physical damage. And that when he got crucified, it was almost like Christ was having to open like when the nails are going in, what was really happening is he was willing his flesh to pull apart. All right. And that, or something like that. And the reason it's called Orthodocetism is it was, because the Docetist heresies, which was compared to, that's the book. The Docetist heresies it was compared with claimed that Christ's suffering was only apparent. It was an apparition and such. All right. So, I would review St. John Damascene's text. I mean, I know that's not the greatest answer
Yes.
you may be looking for,
Yes.
but
So,
I'm very
yeah.
cautious about some of this stuff, lest I get into too much trouble.
Well, Atomic Lead, are you referring to the very long ongoing debate between Hill and Dyer?
To my shame, I'm referring to that exact Twitter warfare. Yes.
That explains why I can't see it, because Jay Dyer has blocked me.
I was about to
So for years, so
For the best.
I can't even get into that.
So I think the main gist of it was that Jonathan was emphasizing the divinity and the humanity, versus Dyer was emphasizing the divinity, and then they were splitting hairs about incarnate versus pre-incarnate, and it gets very nuanced. But
Yeah. Now Bishop
I would-
Enoch
If you go to starting around page 274 of the exact exposition, which I link here,
yeah, hold on.
Saint John Damascene started talking about the nature of Christ as a composite person.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
And I,
274,
yeah,
you said?
274. Go to page 274. So what I would suggest is, I mean, you could read through it.
It only allows
I
me,
have gotten to the point that when you get to these sort of like Reader John was saying, these sort of discussions, I'm very cautious of trying not to say more than what's actually said by like someone like St. John Damascene.
Yeah, refer to the fathers.
Yes, because there are issues in which I can say like historical issues and what have you, which you can read a lot about. But when you start dealing with like issues of like high, for lack of a better word, I hate to use the word high theology, but that's what this is.
Okay,
right?
so I'm here.
All right, so go up one page. Just 273. Okay, so what you'll see here is he says, in the case of our Lord Jesus Christ, that's a little bit further up the first paragraph, he says, however, it is impossible to have a common species, for there never was, nor never will be another Christ of divinity and humanity. In divinity and humanity, the same being perfect God and perfect man. Hence, in the case of our Lord Jesus Christ, one cannot speak of one nature made up of divinity and humanity, as one can in the case of the individual made up of the soul and body. In this last case, we have an individual, but Christ is not an individual because he does not have a predicated species of Christness. That is that our Lord is unique. All right, there's not many different incarnate.
There's not another previous or future Christ.
Exactly. It is precisely for this reason that we say that it was of the two perfect natures, the divine and human, that the union was made. It was not made by mixing or mingling or blending or compounding, as was asserted by the fatal Dioscorus, by Eutyches too, and Severus, and their accursed associates. Neither was it apparent, nor relative, nor by dignity or harmony of will or equality in honor or identity of name or complacence, as was asserted by the enemy of God, Nestorius and Diodorus too, and Theodore Mopsuestia and their hellish band. By the way, I always love how the fathers write about this. They always talk about these heretics as accursed associates and the hellish band, because
they're not modern friendly.
That stuff, because they realize these are they realize these heresiarchs were getting things straight out of demonic deception. Rather, it was by composition. Now, this is what it's interesting. It was by composition, hypostatically, that is to say, without change or mingling or alteration or division or separation. And we confess one person of the Son of God incarnate in two natures that remain perfect. And we declare that the person of his divinity and of his humanity is the same, and confess that the two natures are preserved intact in him after the union. So when he says the person of his divinity, it is also the person of his humanity, which this is why you can see a point to the statement of divine human person, I guess.
And that's why Father Joseph was called a Hillite, even though he had nothing to do with it.
Yes.
Because
I remember, I like many people when I was on Facebook saw this thing. I just didn't want to be involved in it because this is going to go nowhere.
I just figured that the reason I was being
Jonathan was quoting St. John of Damascus. That's why.
Yeah, I thought that the reason that I was being called a Hillite is because when I showed up on Dyer's stream, he literally ended before kicking me off by accusing me of being a Hillite. So I just assumed they were just parroting him. I don't even know what Hill thinks or Jonathan Hill thinks about this sort of stuff.
Jonathan Hill was just quoting the fathers. versus Dyer was kind of extrapolating the fathers.
Well, one of the things I think you always have to avoid in these is doing that.
Yeah.
And I don't know enough. I only remember vaguely what I remember this whole controversy even back in 2018 or something. I was like,
Yeah.
But
it was a bunch of drama.
because and that's you always want to avoid that. It's just that was a disaster. But anyway, it's also like the same thing. People end up attacking Saint Augustine, and then what happens is they go so far that they end up painting themselves into a corner, and they end up finding St. Augustine's language in like St. Athanasius, all right, or St. John Chrysostom or something like that, on some subjects. And then people present those and they say, well, they mean it differently than St. Augustine, which gets into the whole question of what's the meaning. And the people who are more humble about it will say, well, maybe I made a mistake and I went too far and I need to be more careful. All right, and that's the proper way to go about this. To always say, look, if I said this and I was wrong, then I automatically assent to what the church teaches and what the fathers teach. If
I was wrong would solve so many problems, even now.
Yeah, I mean,
if people could
I
learn
learned
to say
that myself. Years we all learned that.
I mean, it was essentially brothers provoking each other to anger. That's all it really was. And it was just using the fathers as like weapons in their arsenal, which is not the way you do it.
Now, the last question I saw was from an anonymous man saying, unity with Rome is intimate. I'm assuming you meant imminent because, I mean, yes, sometimes unity with Rome is intimate, but we don't like to talk about that because there's news stories about it, and it's terrible. But I think you're most likely referring to the 2025 union that's supposed to happen, which probably won't. It'll be the same. If they're already trapped in the box, if World Orthodoxy is already trapped in the Romanist box where they're recognizing their baptisms, they're recognizing their communions, they're allowing them to receive communion now. This is the now. This is not the future. This is the now. Why do they have to do a special display? Are these people, I think, are having wishful thinking because they're hoping, oh, that's what's going to happen. Then I'll go join the true Orthodox. Here's the reality. If that doesn't happen, you're not going to do anything because you have sufficient motivation to leave now. You just don't want to do it. So eventually those people get shown up. You're not really fighting from within. Eventually you admit it. And we've had that. We've seen that before many times. Let me see here.
I think the most we'll see from 2025, the most, is like a common date for Easter.
Okay, we know nobody confessed to a human except for Nestorius the Divider and man worshiper alone. Maximus of Constantinople. Okay, and then in Chalcedon, the fourth council set it not Dioscorus, Eutyches, and Severus, and utterly cut off the Church of Christ to master the thorns of their heresy.
Yep.
And yeah, that's true. All that's true. But with the patriarch, you don't. There's all the common statements and the practice of their churches now, and their commemorations in Constantinople and Rome on their feast days. It's all there. The point is when people say that, they're looking for excuses. And you don't need an excuse to follow the truth. If you do, then you're not truly convinced of the truth to begin with. All right.
Okay.
Let me see here. Oh, someone. NFTU. If you dissect the quote above, it completely destroys Dyer's idea that Christ isn't a divine human person. Maximus is very clear. Well, we do believe that Christ is a divine human person.
But my point is that the reason you would even use that phrase is that obviously the Son of God existed prior to the incarnation, all right, and that there was no human hypostasis that joined the incarnation. I think this is where people get confused when they think someone's saying that, and that when the hypostatic union happened, that the subject or the hypostasis of the Logos took the place that hypostasis natural. Every
soul.
Exactly. Well, no, more than that, because every hypostasis, I think St. John says, is a manifestation of an essence or a nature. All right, and obviously the human nature found expression of itself in the hypostasis of the Logos. So that's why St. John calls it the composite person.
Well, what do we say? Christ became a creature.
Yeah, that's when people get that. That's obviously when you say that, people think
We lost Father Boniface.
Yeah,
Oh, well.
people think that goes into Arianism and such, and I've seen some people make that statement just because they want to sound provocative, and I don't like it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because obviously our Lord has an uncreated nature and a created nature because he has humanity. All right, but that humanity which was created is in union with the divinity, but it doesn't become in its essence
Well, you can't.
uncreated. Obviously,
You can't separate it from kenosis, his emptying out, right?
yeah, but the emptying out is ultimately an act of humility.
Yes.
Right? It doesn't mean that the divinity ceased
Correct.
to be there.
Yeah.
So that's this is always when you're talking about these subjects, and you read. This is why St. John Damascene has such a long text, because he's trying to deal with heresies and with different seeming contradictions, or really antimonies. I'm not sure the right word. Paradoxes, I guess, of the incarnation. And you have to say he is this and he is this, but he's not this. And on the one hand, he is perfect God. On the other hand, he's perfect man. This doesn't mean, but that doesn't mean he's 50% God and 50% man.
Yeah.
Right. Because we're not talking about some mathematical quantity. Right. Because again, there's no other example of the incarnation. I mean, this is completely alien to our way of thinking, and we know about it simply because God reveals it to us, and Christ talks about it, and the apostles taught it, and the Holy Spirit led the church to explicate it. I mean, this is not something you come up with with fallen human reason. If you want to use fallen human reason, that leads to things like Docetism, Apollinarianism, Arianism, Nestorianism, Monophysitism. Those are all products of fallen human reasoning, trying to go beyond the bounds, of divine revelation, say what it doesn't say, go against it, as a combination of the world, the flesh, and the devil.
Yeah.
And that's you understand my point, right?
Yes, isn't that why the fathers also borrowed from the philosophical language of the time, like homoousia?
Yeah, the church, but it's sort of like Saint Raphael Howellini, who reposed in 1910. I think he made the statement that the Orthodox Church accepts transubstantiation, or the meaning of transubstantiation, but we don't accept Thomism.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So in other words, it was a common word to use to emphasize the complete transformation of the bread and the wine into the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Christ. All right. So that each particle is the whole Christ. All right. And the sacrifice transpires by the transformation. If by transubstantiation they mean that, then we accept that. If they mean it in the sense that we have to accept this whole
hyperscholastic,
Aristotelian, because look, what happens if somebody says Aristotelian metaphysics has problems with it? All right, do we want the whole? This is a conversation I had earlier today. Our Father Raphael and I, Hieromonk Raphael, we were talking about this. About that was one of the problems that happened in Roman Catholicism, was they were tied so strongly to essentially a modified version of Aristotelianism, where Thomism became the doctrinal position, the official position, and that if Aristotelianism goes down, then you're going to have problems defending Thomism. All right. And then that happened. You in the long run, you end up getting the Dutch catechism from the 60s, where they say there's transfiguration or something like that, and they end up denying the real presence. All right. And they say, and so it's important that the church, even though it accepted and took language from Greek philosophy, it did it in the sense that it found that these terms corresponded the closest to the reality of divine revelation.
Yep.
All right. It did not mean we accepted all of Plato or Aristotle or the eclectics or whatever. St. Justin Martyr, does talk about how the Greek philosophers got some things right. And he even does go to the point of saying that Socrates was a Christian before Christian or what have you, in a certain sense. And don't go too far with that, by the way.
Well, it's like Plotinus, right? We use a lot of
but then again, Plotinus is later, the 3rd century, and this is this question: did Plotinus in fact get that language from the church? And if you believe, and I think I do so, that the works of Saint Dionysius the Areopagite, at least the essential parts of them are authentic, then what it means is that what's transpiring in Neoplatonism in the 3rd century is the pagan philosophical currents being affected by orthodoxy and trying to take over stuff from the church. It's just like that's the argument about Christmas, nativity. All right.
Yeah.
The Sol Invictus feast comes around like 280 or something like that, or 270.
Yeah.
Or 250. But we have evidence of Saint Hippolytus in 200 talking about the nativity of our Lord being celebrated in Rome and by other Christians in other places in December 25th. All right. So who took what from who?
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Let's not forget that. And remember that Julian the Apostate, he was the one that was the last pagan leader to try to do that. He tried to create sort of a pagan church with a high priest who was like a bishop set over a group of temples, and there'd be this moral system. But it never worked because that was not how paganism was set up. Paganism was not organized like the church. It was just simply groups of temples, and it was a cult of superstition in many ways and fetishism. It was not much different than, to be frank, it wasn't much different than voodoo.
Yeah.
And if you read St. Isidore of Seville and other early writers, they talk about pagans in Spain still in the 500s having dolls of people and trying to put hair to them and stick pins in them. All right. That's not, people like to, say, oh, the primitive Africans and stuff. People in the Roman pagan world and the Greek world, they were doing stuff like that because there's obviously a common demonic source to a lot of this. There's also the fallenness of human nature. All right.
See that 19th century romanticism creeping in a lot.
Yeah. So I mean, you have to understand that when you're dealing with like the pre-Christian world. I mean, I see this on Gab because that's the only social media I use. A lot of people have this like completely absurd notion of what they think the world was before the church
pre-Christian Europe.
Yeah, they don't understand that you were dealing with, in many cases, although it may be exaggerated to some extent, but there was still a significant problem of pederasty and sodomy in those societies. And
there's a lot of Trail of Blood people in there too.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. But I'm more talking about dealing with sort of like white supremacists who have created a false notion, and they go and like people go and then even people who are like against like Zionism, they'll go beyond just simply standard criticism of like Zionist power, and they'll get to this point of saying stuff like the Jews created Plato, and the Jews created Greek.
Oh, like Adam Green.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, it's
wonderful.
like at that point,
Oh my
it's like there's nothing authentic to anything. It's all. I mean, I believe there are conspiracies actually, but you have to have conspiracy proof, and you have to have reasonable evidence for it. It can't just be, well, this sounds like it might be true because I thought about it in my basement, and I'm some guy on the street yelling at people about it. All right. That doesn't mean there's not.
That's not a substantial standard of evidence.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that the Jewish lobby, isn't doing bad things with Gaza and all this other stuff. I'm not denying that, but
but the idea that they fought like the Roman Republic.
This is why we need primary sources, though.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you don't, you end up just creating your own worldview based on nothing but your fears. And then what that ends up doing is it makes your enemies have an easier time attacking you and destroying you because you look absurd because you are absurd. And just because somebody may get 5 aspects of a conspiracy right doesn't mean they're right about the other 95.
Yeah, it's not a bingo card.
Yeah,
it needs to be more than a Dan Brown level of research.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's.
But it was based on a true story. It says so on the cover.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
So I mean, you see how this ends up, damaging the cause of truth in every single subject. But but again, the point was that you had this crazy pagan world, and it was a combination of the works of the martyrs and the apostles and their successors, and in many cases having to work with when St. Constantine came to power, the civil authority, they had to stamp out things like pederasty. The St. Constantine and the other emperors just simply had to arrest people. There was simply no other way around it, and some people had to be executed after they molested enough children. And they're doing that now in Florida. But my point is, the point is that it didn't mean that, and as much as it may, it wasn't done for the sake of vengeance, though. And
Right,
it was
yeah, it
done
was just
simply for
so-
the sake of revenge. It was, and the fathers would have wanted people to repent, obviously. But you're going at some point.
Rabid dogs keep
Let me
hiding.
give you an example. St. Porphyrius of Gaza. Now we're talking about Gaza. When he was appointed bishop in Gaza in the late 380s, 390s, there was still Temple of Baal, or a temple of, there was a Baal Haman or something like that was there.
Mhm.
And they did child sacrifice still. Now technically the Roman government had, even in the pagan period, outlawed that, but they weren't able to necessarily affect all these different areas, especially if it was a closely guarded secret, so to speak.
Yeah.
But so what happened is St. Porphyrius basically had the Roman army come with him and destroy the Temple of Baal. And then they found all the evidence they needed when they pulled out all the thousands of skulls of babies. All right. So that's the reality of what this turns into.
Yeah.
All right. And that was why people talk about them being so harsh. If you're dealing, it'd be like dealing with ISIS to some extent. All right. Or dealing with some crazy, this was a, crazy, pagan cult in many ways. And people who were, and in many ways, the pagan world had moved away, at least in some aspects, from just gross polytheism, at least some of them. And people were striving for this understanding there must be just one God. There must be more than just Jupiter or Zeus raping women or whatever. That can't just simply be the reality of the supernatural.
Well, in places like Gaza, where like the frontiers of the empire was hard to govern.
Yeah, absolutely.
Strictly out there.
Yeah, exactly. Especially, you get into the, Mediterranean, parts of the outer Mediterranean, or into northern Britain, northern Gaul, and all these other areas. So, we have to draw back a little bit when modern writers get upset and they say, oh, the church persecuted so-and-so. When you're really talking about, basically having to arrest child sacrificers.
The same thing that they call persecution today, stopping the
exactly.
infanticide.
Exactly. And if you say that you cannot go and force children to have sex change operations, and you get if the government arrested those people who were doing that, they claim that was persecution. All right. If the government had a moral core, and it doesn't, but if it did, and it said abortion is illegal all across the board, and it went out and arrested abortion doctors for child killing, people would claim, oh, that's persecution. All right. So, that's, I don't know how we got down that route. So,
Well, yeah, I don't either. But oh, hold on, I'm
sorry,
just
I
gonna write
apologize.
this real quick. No, it's not your fault. Because it's how these things go. The conversations move in different directions.
I drank some caffeine, so I guess I'll be all right if we want to go another 30 minutes.
All right, well that's
fine.
Good. Let me see if I can find where we're up to on the things. Okay, hold on. I think okay. I'm over the Chalcedon hurdle. I didn't. Okay. Yes. Okay, that's true. Okay.
Sava makes a good point about John the Maronites.
Right, but I hate skipping, so I got to
sorry,
go through. Okay, so let me see here. If you dissect this idea of a book, okay. Medeon, July 13th. Yeah, a lot's going to have to be discussed in order for true union, but that'll probably take. We don't want union with the Roman Catholics. Honestly, that's they have the World Orthodox and the Roman Catholics have enough union. That's too much union for us. That's like they have to repent and join the church. That's what has to happen. We don't want even if their union's not good enough for you, it's definitely not good. It's good enough for us. We want nothing to do with it.
It's not really union anyway.
Yeah. Well, it's a union of confusion. Father Joseph, any updates on the book you're working on? I'll be honest, with the project that I'm working on now, it may be a while. My best recommendation, as much as I really hate to say this, but if you're talking about a book that covers all the churches in the 20th century, and I particularly am not the biggest fan of this one because it's not very kind to our synod. Hold on a second. Okay. It's not very kind to our synod, but by the way, Anonymous Man, if you're jumping on, you're going to have to connect your devices or it won't work. But I would recommend On the Orthodox Church in the 20th Century, volumes 1 and 2 by Vladimir Moss. It covers 99% of the actual disputes. Dr. Moss does put his opinion on it. He has a very low opinion of us, to the point where he's historically inaccurate. But in the grand scheme of dealing with 100 years, I'd say that that's probably the best book on the subject.
That's why you read multiple sources, ultimately.
Yeah, exactly. Read The Struggle Against Ecumenism as well as Father Basil's letters. We should issue a corrective on some of these things. Hello, Anonymous Man 115. What can we do for you today? What's your question?
I was about
Wow. Your audio.
You might have to reconnect. Your audio is not in good shape.
Yeah, we can't understand what you're saying. Try to pop out and pop back in.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
You just questions, or are you just here to hang out? I guess. And that's all right too, right?
I think he's trying to ask something, but something's happening.
Okay. What the heck?
We hear you now. Whatever you're doing.
Are you okay?
Hold on.
Hey, we heard that. Okay,
let's go through.
He'll be back. He'll be back.
Let's keep on going through the comments.
Let's go into the comments. Okay, canon 2 of the Holy Fathers and tone 76 and 30 pious men having cast down the deception of Eutychus and the heresy of Severus. Yep. Hence, why St. Gregory Palamas is teaching on essence energy. A light bulb went off in my head. Distinction, true. Also, let's look at St. Euphemia's miracle at Chalcedon for more proof. Yes, that's true. I think my favorite video by Craig is specifically the one that goes in depth to show that St. Dionysius' writings are surely authentic. We agree. So the essence of his humanity is in perfect unity with the Logos. Yes. They're doing that now in Florida. Father Joseph Pace, love this channel. LOL. That's no problem. We're glad that you agree. We know the Ecumenist long-term goal is to unite with Protestants, then Judaism, Islam, and then finally complete pagans like Hindus. That's why you gotta stick with the real Orthodox Church that doesn't do that kind of messy stuff. Well, the audio was good, DTC. Unfortunately, Anonymous Man has vanished, and hopefully he manages to come back. I don't know what to do and sort of symbolize our sadness at his passing. Maybe if I had like Celine Dion or something, but okay. So let's see. So Father Boniface, we're back. You're cameraless. How are you doing?
Okay. All right.
Awesome.
Hanging in there.
Okay. Very good. All right. Anonymous Man 115 wrote, okay, that went wrong. I'll have it fixed next stream. No worries.
No problem.
Okay. Wait, Sava has jumped in the chat.
Okay. Hello, Sava.
Good evening, Sava.
God bless. Okay.
Did Anonymous Man have a question you can put in the chat?
Yeah. Anonymous Man, if you have a question you want to put in the chat, you can also until you get that fixed. Sava, what are we doing here? How are you doing?
Hello, I'm doing well. I just wanted to join because I saw there were so many people on. I don't know if this is the most people you've ever had on the stream.
I think if it's not them, I think we've had 7 before, but yeah, this is definitely high. I don't think we've had more than this. So
what happens if we get 2 more? It's 9, but if we get a 10th, does the screen increase?
I believe actually it does. In fact, become 10 people. Like I believe it's up to 10. Then there's another tier on StreamYard, but I can't even afford this one. So your donations are gladly accepted. But that would get it up to 30 people. I don't think we have that. I don't think we have maybe 30 listeners, so I don't think they're all going to jump on it. We'll get to it eventually.
One thing, it was a comment it's a comment Sava made further up.
Okay.
And it is okay. It's when he made it 921. He says the Chaldeans in communion with Rome commemorate, quote unquote, our father among the saints Nestorius.
Yeah, you were talking about this when he said it.
Yeah. And he said, now the other point is interesting is he says John Maron was a Monophilite heretic ordained by other Monophilites. Mm-hmm. And now one point to mention is that there's something like 4 or 5 John Marons or Marons. There actually was an Orthodox Maron from like the year 400 or something like that. But the one Sava is referring to is I think the John Maron from like the 670s, 680s. Because remember, here's the background. When they had the Sixth Ecumenical Council, They gathered in Rome in late 680, and it bled over into early 681, I believe. And when the council opened, you have two sides. There's the Orthodox Western Roman delegation, and then on the other side is the everyone else, the formerly Monophyite side. Okay.
Okay.
And what happened in the first session, because obviously they couldn't have a joint prayer, they couldn't do any of that until they recognized what was what. All right. So the Patriarch of Constantinople, whose name I cannot remember, and he and his delegation rose up and they said that they accepted the letters and the doctrines of orthodoxy, of Diophilitism, of Dianergism, and such, and they repudiate Monophilitism, Monophysitism, etc. And as a result of that, the Patriarch of Antioch, Patriarch of Constantinople, he's Macarius. Patriarch of Constantinople, though, he goes over to the Orthodox Roman side, and then they sort of formally began the council. And then what happens is that by the end of it, it was really only Patriarch Macarius of Antioch and his people that, or at least some of his people, that were still trying to defend Monophilitism. All right. And what ended up happening was they sort of they arrested him, and they said, you're going to go to Rome, and you're going to stay in a monastery for 40 days. And they had various people try to convince him to renounce Monophilitism, but he wouldn't. So he ended up going back to Antioch. And they had, I believe, and that's when technically the Maronite schism of sorts kind of begins, because the Maronites are those Monophilites in Syria and in Lebanon who claimed that they were like the true Church of Antioch. All right. They never accepted the Sixth Ecumenical Council. And then they later rejected the Fifth Ecumenical Council, interestingly enough. The reason this is important to know, is when the Maronites entered into communion with the Vatican, like in 1380 or 50, because of the Crusaders, they claimed initially that they were never really Monophilites. They were everybody lied about them. They never really believed this stuff. All right. And they maintained that position for for centuries, until it got to the point where it was just so evident from historical material and manuscripts that were being uncovered that it was, I think at this point they don't quite make that position anymore. But for a long time, they simply said they, were just slandered by the Greeks or something. I guess Pope Agatho slandered them too, they claimed, or something. But
now Dioscorus asks, wait, why did they reject the Fifth Council?
I'm not. I've read that in numerous places in some of their texts. I think they rejected it because they were upset of the condemnation of the 3 chapters.
Yeah, that's
so. In fact, people think that doesn't make a lot of sense, because if they're going to reject, they're going to be. That seems like they're. There's this weird connection where some of the Nestorians actually embraced the Monophilite doctrine and such.
Okay.
Which you think might be weird, because we usually would say in the Nestorianism is this 2 persons with 2 wills and two natures, but they're not united in one person, obviously. But there are various treatments of it about why this happens and such. But I just think that's interesting, because you have them again. The Maronites became like the most Latinized of all the Eastern Rite Uniates, next to the Belarusian Uniates. They were probably the second most and such. And then anyway, so
yeah. If I might add something, I think Patrick Craig Trulia, in his review on Emmanuel Hatzidakis' book Jesus Fallen, he actually mentions this. He said that there's evidence that Nestorius actually was a monoenergist, because he thought the divinity was overriding the humanity. So
that may be what I'm thinking about. Yeah.
That would lead to Nestorians being sympathetic or outright monothelites.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's what it's mentioned here. The native to the Nestorian position, Baba the Great famously seeks out one will and one power in Christ. Okay. This is a party.
Now that's interesting, because that would make sense that in around 635, when the Monophilite and monoenergist heresy began to be proclaimed in Constantinople, a union was effected by the Monophilite Patriarch of Constantinople with the Nestorian Patriarch at the same time. So that
interesting.
Yeah, that might explain why they found some common ground there, and then they were able to effect a union with something like half of the Coptic population. All right. there were a lot who didn't join, but a lot of them said, well, we'll accept the Greek Patriarch of Alexandria's teaching or whatever. So monothelism almost became like this almost a proto-ecumenism for like they were trying to cover all these different heresies under the monothelite monoenergist label. The whole thing, obviously, because there were too many serious people around, the whole thing just collapsed, obviously. So.
Okay. Well, all right. I'm looking here for more new questions. As always, you can call in using the link above. I think we still have space for 3 more people. And again, if you have any questions, you can also put them in the chat if you're
starting to look like that Square game. You know what I'm
Yeah, I know.
Hollywood Square.
Orthodox squares.
Yeah.
Hey, who'd we lose? We lost Father Simeon. Hopefully he comes back. Okay. And let me see here. So let's see if we've got a
I was looking over that book that Carl and I had mentioned the last stream, The History of Medieval Political Thought.
Oh yeah, you were. Yeah.
And I was rereading through it. It's been busy this week, but I've been trying to reread through sections of it. And I got through the introduction again and the first 2 chapters, but I haven't gotten through the rest. The book's like 400 pages, so I can't. It's going to take time. But what I think from looking over the New Testament section that Carlisle wrote about it and the patristic section, that the I didn't get the sense from any of those texts that that he was saying that the scriptures or the church fathers were teaching that political power ultimately derives from like the will of the people. Because the patristic teaching was definitely that political power ultimately derives from God. Like Romans 13, throughout the rest of the Bible confirms that as well. All right.
Okay.
But I think what is true is that there were certainly some pagan writers who, maybe Ulpian, or maybe there was some quote from Cicero, or I can't quite remember, who did seem to believe that, like, how did the Commonwealth state, I guess, form, and they did think there was almost something like the will of the people that gave the consul power. But when they said the will of the people, though, they meant something different than, let's say, 18th century liberalism, because obviously Rome was not a democracy. All right. Even the Athenian city-states weren't democracies in the conventional sense, right? Like, you were considered represented by, the ruling class in some sense. So anyway, I would get through more of it, and if Carl has any questions, he can send them, and we can maybe discuss them with a Gab account or email.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Yeah, and Carl, if you are. If you're here and you want to jump on the stream, you can. Anyone's free to jump in. Oh, wow, that was quick.
Yep.
Greetings, Carl.
Hey, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, Father, I just heard you talking about that book, and I had the same experience. It's way too long to actually deal with, but I printed out part of it, and it turned out to be the wrong part. So I'll have to get back with you next week on that, or maybe even the week after. Maybe at some point we'll get it figured out.
Yes. Yeah. Father Joseph, if you can send Father Joseph an email, he'll send you my email.
Yeah, just go on the private chat. My email's already in there, so you can send an email to me, and I'll forward it over to Bishop Enoch. And
then we can make a discussion the next time, because I do think it has important points. I did go through. I did review through the New Testament in the patristic section and such. I did get to the point. I was trying to read, but then I started trying to read straight through the book, and I've gotten to the section where he talked about the theories of the Roman lawyers. So he talks about Gallienus and Ulpian, who obviously were predecessors to the Just Institutes of Justinian and such. And I do recall, and I do know that there was still during Justinian's time, and there may have persisted to some extent some modified view during the later Byzantine time, that of called the Lex Regia, which was that and I think this is part of the issue. The way the Roman conceived of the imperial authority, because obviously he did quotes. I did read the section on Seneca. And Seneca would say that like the Caesar was approved by the Roman gods. So they did have this conception of the Roman gods approving the Caesar in some sense. All right. But then they also have this other notion of he somehow derived his power from the Senate and the people. All right. And to me, it almost seems like the Roman imperial throne for like several centuries, even into the Christian area, almost was more analogous to sort of like, like a presidential dictatorship. Countries that have a presidential dictatorship, like let's say like Iraq, Saddam's the president, and then theoretically, maybe after he dies, some general becomes president for life. All right. And they would claim that they are ruling through the mandate of protecting the people. All right. But the emperors would also claim that they're ruling, even the pagan emperors, through some sort of divine mandate that coalesced with that. That's sort of almost what I got from Seneca. And so I'm going to have to read more of it. But what I think happened ultimately is there was this instability, and this is just a side note. There's instability, I think, that happened in parts of the Byzantine Roman throne, and part of it was that they had no strong conception of hereditary succession for the emperors. So anybody could theoretically become emperor. You have cases of, I almost recall there was one case of somebody who was like a cook who just became a successful military commander. And then eventually he married the emperor's like niece, and he became the emperor or something like that. All right. And the problem, of course, with that is if the emperor dies and there is no family to succeed him, then you can have a civil war. All right. But on the other hand, you look at sort of like the Slavic monarchies, the Germanic centered monarchies. They did have strong concepts of hereditary succession. And even though you may get a bad ruler because of maybe the son isn't well trained or dilettante, there is at least some sort of stability to the society. All right. Now, of course, I don't want to go too far with that because the Eastern Roman Empire lasted for 1,000 years, past a lot longer. So let's not, go too hard on against or too strong against that kind of idea. Even though I think even near the end they did have the Paleologan dynasties, there was the Macedonian dynasties, but you look at like St. Constantine, he comes to the throne, and then I think the Constantinian dynasty basically Theodosius, maybe it ended around the time of Theodosius the Great, because it depended, could you get your sons to accept the throne, and could they be competent military commanders? And such. So, but we'll try to read more of that book, Carl, because I do think it does obviously bear upon Orthodox ideas about rulership and such. So I'll try to get back to you.
And Father, I think the helpful section to look at is volume 2, and then in maybe the first 100 pages. I think they recapitulate in that part the relevant sections from volume 1 where the information actually is that we want.
Volume 2, I think, goes from the 10th century to the 13th century.
That's correct.
But you're right. The introduction. There's 5 volumes of that whole series, that text. And I remember reading years ago Volume 1 and part of Volume 2, and I skipped through the other volume because I wasn't really prepared to read 3,000 pages. But yeah. So there's also, if you could ever find it, there may be some primary source translations of 9th century. Have you ever? Here's an interesting book that I've recommended before. If you ever you can find like a $10 copy of it on Abbey Books or on Amazon, and it's called. It is a book by Carl F. Morrison, Ecclesiology. Let me see. 2 Kingdoms, Ecclesiology, and Carolingian Political Thought. And it was written like in the 1960s. The book was actually written on Mount Athos, if you read the introduction. He wrote it on Mount Athos. And it deals mainly with the 800s. And it does deal with like issues of papacy versus monarchy. What is the correct understanding of the church and the state and such like that. But he does go into these similar subjects. And if you ever... find a copy of that book for $10. I would recommend, buying it because it probably would be helpful too. So,
okay. Well, thank you, Father, and thank y'all for the live stream. We'll see you next time.
God bless.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I'm going to actually put that question that I just got. I'm going to put on screen. Give me a second. Let me just let them know. And I'm going to get to Andrew Camus's question here. And this is a good one. I see some True Orthodox websites and channels upload more material from Father Herman Podmashensky than World Orthodox sites. Is this just historical, or is there some post-Rocor Platina history that is not well known? If this is too hot, please forgive me. I'm just aware of become aware of the attempts to rewrite Father Seraphim's life. No, it's not an unfair question at all. The problem is that one of the ways people have become accustomed to true orthodoxy is going down, and many years to DTC for pointing this out a few different ways. There's the Platina rabbit hole, and what we mean by that is that you start by reading stuff that has been heavily revised, written works by Father Seraphim, etc., but then start discovering that earlier editions, in fact, said something completely differently, the most notably being removing references to the True Orthodox Church of Greece, to the True Orthodox Church of Russia, etc., that were in Father Seraphim's writings.
Even the Catacomb Church.
Yeah, the Catacomb Church. Father Herman, to some degree, was not, he wanted to preserve Father Seraphim's legacy. In the end, he did capitulate, but I think most of the changes that they really made were after his death.
Father Damascene took over, I think.
Yeah,
really.
And once he took over, he was just rewriting everything on behalf of the Serbians.
They're part of the Serbian Patriarchs, so they were required to do this stuff at that point.
So the point is, the reason why a lot of people are very interested is because they've gone down that Father Seraphim rabbit hole and realized, wait a second, am I being lied to? So yes, that is the reason you're seeing that is most likely because, especially among younger and newer converts who have been very much affected by the life of Father Seraphim, finding that out is kind of like it's like getting hit with a ton of bricks. So of course that's why there's more of a focus on that than you see in a lot of older True Orthodox stuff, because for us, he died as a Rocor monk before the Union. We don't see anything controversial about him. But it was the rewriting that freaked people out. I guess we lost someone else. I'm not sure who did we lose? Reader John. Okay. I'm not sure.
I'm still here.
Huh?
I'm still here.
Okay. Well, that's good, Reader John. You're still there. Well, whoever left, you're free to come back. And let me continue on. And here was the question that I got from a Nicoletta 8 on Discord. So what I'm going to do is I am going to put it in a comment, and I am going to put that here. So
speaking of
this question, so is TO the same as GOC? I understand you said it's just the website, so you are in GOC. The reason that they asked is because somebody said is NFTU different from GOC? Yeah, NFTU is a website. It's like kind of like our True Orthodox news and apologetics site, and this is the YouTube channel for it. But now to answer that question, well, I'll put it this way. True Orthodoxy kind of represents all of the confessing Orthodox throughout the world that are fighting ecumenism, Sergianism, and some older heresies, etc. When you're talking specifically about the GOC, you're talking in general about dioceses and administrations of the True Orthodox Church, primarily in Greece, who use that name, that nomenclature, as well as like the GOC in America under Metropolitan Demetrius is under the GOC of Greece under Archbishop Kallinikos. However, for example, most Russian jurisdictions do not refer to themselves as GOC. There is
Pravoslavny Circo.
Yeah, well, that would be
Orthodox Church.
True Orthodox Church. And it's a distinction without a difference. Genuine versus true, they're synonyms. Most of the time, the nomenclatures are due to legal registration, etc. We all understand ourselves as just the Orthodox versus the innovators. But
I think in Greece, there's you mentioned like you legally can't call yourself.
You can't do it
the Church
anymore,
of Greece,
right?
If a true Orthodox, if like Metropolitan Cherubim said, no, he said in legal documents, he said, we are the Church of Greece. Yep. Well, if he said that, then the State Church of Greece would claim all of his property.
Correct.
So you have to call yourself like, you can't, and he can't just simply call himself the Church of the Genuine Orthodox Christians, because technically, like the Kallinikos Synod, I think has like some legal claim to that. So you have to call yourself something like Church, the Church of the Genuine Orthodox Christians of the Patristic Calendar or something like that.
Yeah.
Because it's not like people are just like making up names to get them longer. It's literally, do you want to keep your property or not? Do you
exactly? So that's part of the reason why. That's part of the reason why they have a different naming. It's usually for legal reasons, not for. And there's been a lot of clarification.
Like in Russia, you cannot call yourself just simply the Russian Orthodox Church. Like there's a famous video that used to be on YouTube where there was a ROAC church in Moscow or St. Petersburg or something like that. This was like in 2010 or 12, and it had simply a plaque on. It was like this church, and it was a ROAC church, like in a back street. And just some hole in the wall. I'm not saying in a bad sense. It was just, like that kind of place, someone's old house that was, turned into a church. And the plaque said something like St. John's Russian Orthodox Church. All right. And the MP got freaked out about that. They had some like MP associate group go there with a mob that demanded to see the so-called priest. And there's this 19-year-old boy who was, I think, like a reader, the son of the priest, who walked down in his cassock. And they were yelling at him and screaming at him. I remember this on YouTube from years ago. And they were getting really violent in his face. And they were saying, "Why are you calling this They ripped the plaque off the wall. And I think they were trying to provoke the boy, like this 19-year-old kid, into like yelling at them. But he was very cool and collected. And he didn't say anything. And it ended up backfiring on the Moscow Patriarchate when it was posted on YouTube.
Yep,
I've seen the video, of course.
You know what I'm talking about, right, Sava? You know what I'm talking about.
Of course, I'm in the ROAC. It's actually interesting. I wanted to bring this story up because it got brought up at a church earlier today. So when the Soviet Union fell, and of course the Russian Federation became a thing, they were reorganizing the government and whatnot, and it was actually Metropolitan Valentin. Well, at the time, it was just Bishop Valentin. He went to Moscow with Archbishop Lazar. And he went to Moscow, and they wanted to register the Free Russian Orthodox Church in the Russian government. They showed up, and they were going through the names, and they had to register with the government as a religious organization. They realized the Moscow Patriarchate hadn't actually registered with the new Russian Federation. So Metropolitan Valentin and Archbishop Lazar wanted to register what would eventually become the ROAC as the Russian Orthodox Church. And the Russian government told him, well, no, that name is reserved for the Moscow Patriarchate when Alexei comes in here. And they said, well, can we take the name Free Russian Orthodox Church? And they said, yeah, you guys can have that.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. Let me see here. Okay, so we're getting more questions coming in. And by the way, welcome back, Anonymous Man 15. Let's give you the chance to ask your question first.
Okay. I was just actually going to say a point. I forget who said it, and I don't even know if he was being literal, but he was saying, I don't know how he got here, and I was just going to say one word: nihilism. That's how we got here. I see it every day at my job, especially with the music that is played at my job. It's always that angry, I hate everything metal.
Father Seraphim Rose wrote a book called Nihilism.
Yeah, if you've read it, it's fantastic.
I have. It's the book that got me started on the orthodoxy rabbit hole.
Father Seraphim once again. Awesome to hear. Well, if you have any other questions or comments, let us know, Anonymous Man 115. I'm going to try to get into a couple more questions that we got. This is a Western Rite question, so it's good you're here with Vladika Enoch. Good evening, fathers. What version of the Latin breviary do the Western Rite Orthodox use? I know the RC Church has changed it many times since the 16th century, so I'm curious about which lections you use at Nocturne.
We use the Benediction lectionary. We use a monastic office. When people usually say the Latin breviary, what they're talking about is what's called the parochial or the canon's office. And the breviary simply means that a breviary was when they took all the books of the divine office, the hours, and they condensed them into texts into 4 different volumes that simply doesn't have any music, any notation, and such like that. Whereas if you were to use those books with all the musical notation, which you need, you're talking about at minimum something like 10, 300-page volumes or 400-page volumes. All right. So we use the monastic, you might call it monastic breviary. And the lections we use at Matins are based off, basically, they're 10th and 11th century Anglo-Saxon, French, and Italian Benedictine usages. Technically, you have to remember, the Nocturnes lectionary or the Matins lectionary that's read like for the 3 lessons or the 12 lessons on a Sunday or Great Feast, that there's actually a technical, there's 2 things to remember about that. One, there's what the Ordo says, the Ordo Romanus, all right? And that actually says, for example, you're supposed to read through, let's say, the whole of the book of Jeremiah from Monday after the Sunday before Palm Sunday unto the early morning of Holy Wednesday, all right? But Abba Alfred of Incham, even in the 10th century, says that combined with the long office and combined with the idea that you were oftentimes theoretically supposed to read something like, 10 chapters almost, or 12 chapters at a whole Nocturnes became very difficult because Nocturnes ended up becoming some sort of like a 4 to 5 hour situation. All right. So what Abba Alfred of Incham and other monastic writers by the 10th century said is they ended up basically giving like essential parts of the lectionary, which is sort of what you find even in the later Benedictine lectionary books from even the post-schism period. They sort of they kind of retained some of those a lot of those aspects. So I mean that may not be the that's my answer, I guess. So if you have any further questions, I can go through that. But you see, technically, if you look at things like the Regularis Concordia or and a lot of these other materials, the technical way, for example, you would be in church literally probably 17 hours a day or 18 hours a day. There is, it's sort of like there was this from an Eastern equivalent where it would be there was this several times in the Kiev Divinity School back in like 1899 or 1904. They have this idea of we want to do the entire Typicon, all right. And what they found out is that when you try to do everything in the Byzantine Typicon, everything that Saint Theodore Studite says, in on many days you almost don't have enough hours of the day to do it, as such. But so that I'm not saying that's not. I'm not saying there were monasteries that were called the sleepless ones, all right, in which they always had a continuous cycle. It was just so you have the canonical hours, like the main 7 hours, but then you have these sort of inter hours. You had additional psalms that were read, additional services that were done, and you would have the monks go to the main hours, all right. And then you have other sets of monks that are charged with keeping the Psalter being read, keeping other various petitionary services being done and such during that time. It's just that sort of requires a sort of a more than 4 or 5 people in many ways to do that. And it also requires you not have other like responsibilities as like a priest or a bishop or something like that to go minister to people and take care of other issues. So that's why oftentimes I say, while it's great, we want to do everything as long as we can sort of do the canonical hours as specified by St. Benedict, or in the case of the Byzantine Orthodox and East, like the Typicon of St. Theodore Studite and St. Sabas, etc. As long as you can do those basic hours, that's great. And if you get to the point where you're doing more, that's even better. As such.
Well, I think
go ahead.
I think some people want to know what version is used and where can you get it.
For the lections, we haven't formally published our own lectionary. The best lectionary sources I can email it to him. I have composed a directory from Abba Alfred's directions from his letters to the monks of Incham about what lessons theoretically or supposed technically to be read if you were to do the full service cycle. But then there's also the other book. There's a book published called the Matins, the Matins. It's like Matins Lectionary, or I can't remember. Matins Breviary, I think, published originally 1920. And they translated the traditional, which goes back to the 10th century, essential Benedictine lectionary system for nocturnes.
I will add.
But my only point is that if you get that book, you have to understand that the translators added like like Roman Catholic feast to it. So you have to know, don't use those texts. If it's a feast like St. John Chrysostom or St. Augustine and etc., that's perfectly fine. But like some of these other materials, they added stuff to it. It's sort of like how Orthodox early on had this problem where in America, a lot of the English texts were by uniates, and you'd have to take these books and like cross stuff out. What have you?
Well, one good thing we should say about the hours, Vladik, and I think this is what Father Boniface is attesting to, is that we do have, the Medieval Monastic Psalter published by St. Gregory's Press.
Absolutely, but we're talking about the monastic nocturnes lectionary readings. And that's a very specific.
So that's very
specific.
That's very.
What I'm talking about is people want to look at something that's in their hands that they could practice themselves.
Okay. Volume 1 and Volume 2 of the Medieval Monastic Psalter, sold at St. Gregory's Press. You can
they
find
are available on Lulu, but I have some news for people on that because we will be republishing them. I have to do some republishing. It'll be the same edition as previously, but because of inflation, etc., the prices will be going up. So you might want to get it now because I'm working on that in the next couple of weeks.
If you get to the point where you're serious about doing nocturnes, all right, which it can be a long night office, and you're that serious about it, contact me, and I will send you the lectionary material for nocturnes. A lot of people who don't really do the 2 to 3 hours nocturnes if they're lay people and such. And I don't, I'm not trying to force that, but if you're interested in the proper reading schedule and what readings to use, contact me, and I'll send those to you. Because I have done a lot of them, so I don't have to rely on these other books, but it's in loose leaf sheets and papers and things like that.
So eventually that will be printed.
We have to consolidate it all together. This is my problem. My problem is I'm having like 5 different projects. I basically almost finished the epistle book, supposed to finish that and publish it in February, got sidetracked, started doing the lectionary stuff again, the lectionary work again. I started doing revising the pocket prayer book, then the expanded prayer book, and I ended up, and when you do that, you end up not finishing any of the projects, except the prayer book. That was the one we finished it. So,
which is available. Although people are asking about the expanded Orthodox prayer book, which we will get to. It's just there's so many projects. The Oscar says, wait, so the true Orthodox think that Kirill of Moscow will end up uniting with Muslims. That's the weird thing about him is how close he is with Islam. Well, we showed last week, or the last stream, we had Patriarch Bartholomew was showing off the Quran and talking about how it's the word of God to the Muslims. So this has been more common. Patriarch Parthenius of Alexandria, before he died, was like Muhammad's a prophet of God. So I mean, this isn't new.
Patriarch Bartholomew gave a gift to the Quran, saying it's a sacred book.
Yeah.
So now the remember about that is, and this is, I think people have to be very careful that they'll say that NATO and the Western liberal powers are, obviously very bad.
I think people have to be very careful.
Somebody mute.
They'll say that NATO.
No, it's on the Boniface side, I think. Okay, no, it's Sava. Okay, so the reverse of that is then to simply assume everything that comes out of the Russian Federation ruling government is wonderful and great. All right, and people have to think almost as binary sense of, well, if this guy is, if these are the bad guys, then these guys must be the good guys in all century. It's sort of like, well, if South Korea has such a terrible government, then maybe North Korea isn't so bad or something like that. All right, and that's not a appropriate way of thinking because you end up getting led down, the garden path, so to speak. But remember, unfortunately it's a Russian Federation policy to sort of rewrite Russian history at this point and to proclaim that, Russia's always been this land where Islam has been loved and protected, and they're almost forgetting the whole Caucasus Wars and like hundreds of years. Russia was at war with Islam for hundreds of years. There's a reason those domes have a cross over top, a crescent. All right, and those ancient churches. That's to symbolize the conquest of Orthodoxy over the crescent. All right. Remember, during the 18th, 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries, Central Asia was this one big battleground where the Russian Empire had to fight these, various emirates or Islamic forces not just the Chechens, but others that were being supported by either the Persian Islamic power or the Turkish Islamic power. And, you know, that of course upset people like Tolstoy, who claimed he saw atrocities that the Russian army, maybe, I don't know what happened. I'm sure maybe there were Russian commanders that in the 1850s that did retaliatory atrocities after the Muslims attacked Russian villages and killed hundreds of people or whatever. I'm not defending that. But obviously Tolstoy had his own, you know, spiritual problems, which was why he rejected orthodoxy. But Russia was at war with Islam for centuries. And the problem they have now in Russia is that the Muslims are the main group having children. All right. That's like when you see in Russia like population growth going up or stabilizing, it's because of large numbers of Muslims having like 4 or 5 kids. All right. Whereas even though abortions have been going down, they're still pretty high in relative terms and in absolute numbers for ethnic Russians. All right. So part of the strategy is to try for the Russian Federation government to try to get, you know, Kirill. I mean, I know some people who are like, Kirill doesn't believe in anything, and that may be true. Maybe he's just doing whatever they want. Though then again, I think he probably has his own ideas, and he's sort of his own competitor, but he knows also he can't do too much, you know, because he doesn't want to lose funding or whatever. But you know, it's simply an insane, terrible situation where they're proclaiming Islam. Like Putin in that interview with Tucker Carlson, you know, said a lot of, you know, things like he doesn't you know, Islam was closer to orthodoxy. I think you remember he said that.
He came out as a perennialist. Yeah,
exactly. And he's like, religion is just about being loving to people and things like that or something. That's the core of religion, and not about hitting your head on the ground or have you. And if you listen to other things he said, like one person years ago asked him, how would the world end? And he said, I can tell you how the world will end. It will end because the sun will get big and the earth will be burned to a crisp. No, there was no understanding of the second coming of Christ. It was an answer you could just as well expect it from the president of France, all right, or some, you know, a Canadian leader or American leader or something like that.
Wasn't Kirill at a nationalist congress recently?
I don't think they would have called it a nationalist. See, the word in Russia, if you use the word nationalist in Russia, you're treated basically like you're some sort of like you know, want to exterminate people or something like that. They don't, that word, that's considered a bad word large in Russia.
Well, they were promoting Ruski Mir and the Sacred War.
Well, when they see here,
the Ruski Mir is not what they mean by nationalism.
Yeah, when they say the Russian peace or the Russian world, Ruski Mir, it's almost like a pseudo Pan-Slavism. It's not even like the Pan, you know. And here's the problem: you can only go so far into when you start listening to things Putin says about these subjects, and you start to realize that this is a guy who even if you read his books about, you know, the state and all this other stuff, you listen to the Tucker Carlson interview and other speeches. I mean, he talks about in several interviews how he defends, like, you know, the right to murder children in abortion. And that he believes that should be legal up to a certain point, and that, you know, they have this 12-week ban, but it has loopholes that you can intentionally drive a truck through, right?
Which is not really orthodox.
Yeah, exactly. No, of course not. I mean, orthodox position is all abortion should be illegal because you're murdering children. You can't have that. And of course, this doesn't mean like America is great, because America is terrible country as well. I mean, I don't want to go down that route of like, oh, well, then everything's great about NATO because it's evil too. All right. But the reason we as Orthodox talk about Russia is that, for whether you like it or not, Russia has historically played perhaps the most important role in Orthodox Christian history for the past some odd 700 years. All right. Or 600 years since the fall, 500 years since the fall of Byzantium. And, you know, we have to talk about it. I mean, frankly, I don't expect much from the American experience, so to speak. And that, you know, because we're so disconnected even from Western European history that goes back to Orthodoxy at one point.
The American experiment,
yeah. I don't expect much from that, but you sort of would expect Russia to have somehow recovered but we have not simply saw that yet. And again, listening to Putin, to me, he sounds like he's sort of like a 1982 liberal Democrat.
Yeah.
Right. That will talk about like a 1982 American liberal Democrat will be like, I like the flag and I like this, and we don't want to have too much gay stuff, but as long as you keep it quiet, and let's have some abortion, they're like a moderate radical, for lack of a better word. All right. And that's not orthodox. That's not traditionalism in the traditional sense. That's not traditional monarchism. That's none of those things. All right. And obviously, it doesn't mean the crazy Jewish guy Zelensky who's running Kiev, and it doesn't mean he's this figure that would be any better. It is just a terrible situation, but you have to be realistic about it. You can't simply go in there and think. You can't move to Russia and be like, what, go to Moscow and then be horrified when you see some stuff that you wouldn't want to see. All right.
I just thought it was interesting that it wasn't a religious event per se.
I think that Russia is trying to modernize itself in compromising with Islam. For example, I saw a thing where Putin visited Chechnya, and I forget the name of their leader, but he's basically building a friendship with Islam and saying we accept Islam and Christianity and everything else. And I think he's trying to create a peace in this kind of a situation, because maybe he needs the Muslims to fight, some other threats like the combined West. And so he's, I think, teeter-tottering on a rather, he's walking on thin ice that can really do him harm. And maybe Kirill is just following suit, recognizes the problem, and they're kind of working hand in hand, in a very problematic compromise for sure.
Well, ultimately, it always seems like Western liberal powers are more experienced at manipulating Islam, or just allying it to get it to do what it naturally wants to do. Like they created ISIS and all this, and the Mujahideen and what have you. So he's probably afraid of that. And for whatever reason, whenever the Soviets and then the Russian Federation, which is basically the post-Soviet, just the Soviet bureaucrats who, who just now wanted to keep one power, it always, everything coming out of the Soviet and post-Soviet space is always like clumsy. And it's like here, Kadyrov, we'll give you money, go fight these people. And Kadyrov is like hated by like the more devout Muslims because he lives, if you know about him, he lives a terrible person. His personal life is all over the news all the time. All right.
He's a degenerate.
Yeah, exactly. And it's that's probably not too far from it. So it's like everything's clumsy that comes out of it. I don't really buy that the SVR and the FSB are that sophisticated. I know, and what was the guy who wrote the book in the 60s about the communist infiltration and such? I can't remember. He made some good points, but the problem is that if you know what to look for, like when you read RT, like you read RT English and then you read RT Spanish, all right? Oftentimes they have very different stories, all right? And it's very clumsy about what they're trying to do. All right. So, but you're right. Islam, Patriarch Kirill, they have laws in Russia that you're not supposed to incite hatred against another religion. And it's very vague about what they mean when they talk about that intentionally. So they can go after, whosoever they want. So,
okay. So I'm going to start getting to some comments because we've got quite a few.
I have a brief thing to add to the whole Islam talk. With Leo Tolstoy, he had an issue not with the Chechens, but there was the quote-unquote Circassian genocide. So in the 1860s, the Russian Empire invaded Circassia, or they called themselves Akhedye. And they claim, and this is actually a claim that still gets repeated all the time, but Leo Tolstoy believed this as well, it's false, that the Russian Orthodox Church supported this genocide because the Russian soldiers went in there and they basically exterminated the Circassians. and they claim that the Russian Orthodox Church was actually for it. I've actually seen letters, because when I was coming to Orthodoxy, this was actually a hurdle. It's like, well, I thought the Orthodoxy hasn't killed anyone. I found these letters from Orthodox bishops in Russia where they were condemning what the Russian military was doing. And I don't remember who the Tsar was at the time, but he was a very secular person. And I think one of the generals...
Alexander II, I believe. He was the liberal Tsar.
Yeah, he was very secular. And then the other thing that really I thought was sort of smoking a gun against this idea that the Orthodox Church murdered all these Muslims in the Caucasus Mountains was the fact that the country that took in the most Circassian refugees at first wasn't the Ottoman Empire, wasn't Safavid Persia, it was Bulgaria. And it was at the insistence of the Metropolitan of Bulgaria that they took in all these Circassian refugees. So Tolstoy believed the Russian Orthodox Church supported this genocide. It didn't. And there's also a good case to be made that they didn't really know what was going on. I mean, Circassia was the backwoods. It's not like people in Moscow knew what was going on in Circassia.
Well, was it the other question is when they called it a genocide, how much of it was exaggerated as opposed to real? Has there been studies about that actually?
I don't know exactly. I wouldn't be surprised because the Ottoman Turks kind of considered Circassia, Chechnya, Dagestan, Panksi Valley and whatnot, Abkhazia to be their backyard. And there was a lot of political struggles between the Ottomans and the Russians. And when they took over Circassia and Chechnya and Dagestan, the Ottomans probably did issue some sort of propaganda, but I think it is at least somewhat well attested. I'm actually trying to go here on the
reason I
Wikipedia,
say
because, of
that
course,
is you can always imagine think of a circumstance where if you're the Russian army coming into Circassia and all the men are called to jihad against you, all right? At that point, all the men who have taken up arms against you, how do you distinguish between a combatant and a non-combatant? And if you go into a village and you go into a village and it's, you know, and you execute all the men because they have been engaged in jihad with you, is that you know, a genocide, or is that, you know, executing enemy soldiers because they have, you know, continuously attacked you? I mean, I could, if you're talking about killing women and children, right, that's horrible. All right. But I that's why I'm always very careful about this stuff, about what exactly the context is and what have you. I'm not saying terrible things didn't happen, because a lot of these in these situations, you know, like you can think of times like the Byzantine Empire, you know, did things that should have done that were terrible, like in the 850s and what have you, or 840s.
well, looking at Wikipedia, at least what Wikipedia is claiming, which I realize Wikipedia is not a great source. It's been a while since I've read into this, so I'll have to probably check the sources. It says most of the massacres were at the behest of a certain general named Grigory Zas.
Okay.
Grigory Zas was apparently responsible for most of the massacres, and I mean, again, this idea
so that's
that
that's not an order even coming from the Tsar telling him to do this. That may just be a general who told his troops to go out and kill a bunch of people, I guess, right?
That's what it appears like, because he was a count, and the Tsar just told him, "Hey, go put these people on their heel." So,
all right,
we gotta
go ahead, Reader John.
I was just gonna say, we got to remember at that time, it's not like somebody could pick up a cell phone and call the general and say, "Hey." I mean, it took time to get messages from the front to the Tsar, and
also the other consideration is who were his troops, because if they were employing like Muslim troops or Mongol troops or Tartar troops, some of these guys they were not behaving in European military standards.
Yeah.
All right. You're eventually putting Russian military uniforms on other tribesmen whom you like Reader John. They may want to take vengeance from somebody.
Yeah.
You know,
it might have just been conscripts,
and it becomes a giant catastrophe. All right.
Okay. Now, I'm going to do something weird here, because first off, because I want to get through some of the comments. This is an interesting comment from Father Simeon. He says, "So if you know that our jurisdiction of Metropolitan John is the true and only descendant of Archbishop Augustinius of Athens, that is controversial." I do want to get back to it because I have Sava, since you're here. You asked me a question when you'd left the stream. You can now read your own question.
Yes. Do you have any patristic commentary on St. Paul to the Corinthians, his first epistle to the Corinthians, in particular verses chapter 12, verses 27 to 31, and chapter 14, verses 1 to 5.
Asking for
St. John Chrysostom. Have you looked at St. John Chrysostom's commentary on 1 Corinthians?
I have not. I was given this comment or this question by someone while the stream was going on, so I just typed it out.
So can you bring? Okay, so 1 Corinthians chapter what? Say it again.
12.
Chapter 12.
27 to 31.
12, 27 through 31. Okay, hold on. I think I can find something here. Homily 31 of St. Chrysostom on 1 Corinthians. Okay, just say it again. Verses what? Beginning verse what?
27
to 31.
It's on the screen.
Okay, so homily 32. Okay, I'm gonna put it in the. If you go to this, I put it in the private chat because I don't have access to the other chat. I'm not logged in properly.
Okay. Did you want me to put it on screen?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Okay. This is St. John Chrysostom's homily 32, 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 27, correct? It says, now ye are the body of, we could read it, but there's that commentary. And what was the other section of 1 Corinthians?
14, 1 through 5.
Yeah.
14, 1 through 5. Let me go a little further. Okay, so in here is homily 35. In the private chat, which is also would help that. Now, there used to be the patristic Bible commentary that was on Google. That was on.
It's gone for some reason.
They took it off, and I believe it happened because somebody was putting up "quote unquote" copyrighted translations of some of that material, as if you can own the church fathers because you translated it. But anyway, so they took the whole thing down. But it was unfortunate because there was 95% of the material was free, and you could have looked at any Bible verse and they would give you every patristic commentary that was available in English. So I would recommend St. Chrysostom's. There might be, if you ever look, there's a book called Ancient Christian Commentary, and they do generally they do have a lot of Orthodox saints that we would accept, like St. Chrysostom, St. Augustine, St. Ambrose, and they do go through their commentaries on different verses, although sometimes they will include like Origen or Theodore Mopsuestia, and you can just regard obviously Theodore and Origen's things. But that's the best I can.
Yeah, so St. John Chrysostom's volumes, if you want to copy them, they're in the private chat, Sava. I'll copy where they are. That's from Tertullian.org.
Yes, I copied them, and Tikon says thank you, Botica.
No problem. Now, getting back to Father Simeon, because I know this is a controversial question, but I get it. A controversial statement. That is a reference to the fact that Archbishop Auxentios did give the Portuguese bishops a Thomas of autonomy. So in that sense, technically the only true and direct descendant of Archbishop Auxentios would probably be Maximus of Kefalonia, but his synod disintegrated. So our synod was we're further west, but yeah, we were given that autonomy by Archbishop Auxentios. Death to Compromise says, when the MP says Muslims and Orthodox have the same God, it sure looks that way. Very true. Sava says, well, I don't know if you want to read your own comments.
Oh, no. Well, I think it's self-explanatory. I think
look on the MP Department of External Church Relations website, and it's full of ecumenical events with Monophysites now.
And that website is mosspat.ru. It's all over. You'll see them
it's
all
not
over the
like
place.
and it's not like these are like one-off events. These are events, and I know what they're doing. This is also like the clumsiness of, like, again, Russian Federation foreign policy of, like, well, we got to draw closer to India, so let's have the Indian Monophysite patriarch come over here. And Kyril's like, he likes ecumenism, so he can get in on it, and and then they can always say, well, the Antiochians have an agreement with them, so.
Now, OTP writes, MP is looking to unite with the Ethiopian Monophysites before anything. That's why they're always having dialogues and joint prayer with them recently. Sava says they were trying to do that with the Indian Monophysites. The Melankarans and the Ethiopians are something of the black sheep of the Monophysite world. Both. MP leaving it all open these days. Wow. Goal. Wait, Bartholomew said it's the word of God. I would
you
say
said
probably
the Quran was a sacred book.
The Sacred Book, yeah. And so, you have to see it. It's on the EP site. There's ways to find it. Most likely, I'm sure DTT
Eritrea, Ethiopia
might have made a video of that. Yeah, but Eritrea.
But it's a lot better governed than Ukraine.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you for the detailed answer. Just a final comment.
Yes.
I thought it odd that some Western lectures include excerpts from Origin. What are your thoughts
but
on
I can
that?
tell you most of the Benedict, like the Subiaco and Monte Cassino lectionaries, they did not have. They'd exercise that.
Okay.
Those I don't know. It's sort of like this. Why were Orthodox people in the East, let's say in the East, and the Orthodox in the West, obviously, but why were Byzantine scribes still copying the works of Origen in the 10th, 11th century? And what were they still talking about? All right, even though he had been condemned, and everybody East and West and Orthodoxy accepted his condemnation. I think because maybe they thought some of the stuff was all right,
Valuable.
but I can tell you we don't use those lectionaries from Origen or something. Various monastic writers are much more strict about that.
EP YouTube
But
channel.
you're right. It is strange that some people did. Some people did and did continue to include that. You're right.
Yep. There's videos of them praying with Sikhs, Muslims, and Zoroastrians. Even I've heard there are about 3 million Muslims in Moscow. There's a lot. Many of them, I would say, are migrants or descended from migrants. Yeah. They pray in the streets, etc. That's true. We know Kirill has been teaching Monophysites since at least the 1960s. That's also true, and we've been with the Catholics as well. Is there a new designation in post-Sergianism, neo-Sergian? No, we just still call it Sergianism. Just new people, new Sergianists. So Putin isn't the new Tsar? No, I'm sorry.
I mean, if you listen to these talks, he's not a monarchist.
No,
he's basically
not at all.
to me he sounds he sounds like a sort of a moderate liberal Kerensky pseudo cosmopolitan nationalist, not even real nationalist.
Reminds me of a blue dog Democrat.
Yeah, exactly. 1982 liberal, that exactly. And I know people get upset when you say that, but that's sort of the impression I get.
You know what concerns me about the Ukrainian war is just if you forget the all the hype that's going on and just look at the results, you have the Ukrainian Orthodox getting destroyed. You have Orthodoxy getting destroyed, and that's the end result of everything. And so it's working for the haters of Christ, the haters of the Orthodox Church. So that I just wonder where Putin's head's at, because it seems like he's just cooperating in the Ukrainian genocide of the Orthodox Church.
Well, in the end, the problem, of course, is in the end, Orthodoxy, so the so-called Orthodoxy of like the Moscow Patriarchate and the Fanars creations, they've also devoured themselves too.
Yeah.
Like the UOCMP, Ukrainian Orthodox Church Moscow Patriarchate, which is now calls itself Ukrainian Orthodox Church, it basically persecuted to even before the Kievan government went after him. The one big sort of anti-ecumenist, and I know he was milquetoast on it, but a long Zionist. I'm not defending everything about him, who was basically attacking ecumenism for years, and then even stopped commemorating Kirill, and then maybe he was going to stop. Maybe they thought he was going to be another Diomir Chukotka, but not become a name worshiper and whatever. They brought the hammer down on him. Unfortunately, you had Mitrofan Onufrius just as much as Mitrofan Epiphany of the Fanar creation, bringing in all the ecumenism, modernism, condemning people who were against it. So, I mean, it's like, you have the Ukrainian government and the Russian government engaged in this, destructive conflict. And then you have the so-called official Orthodox bodies engaging and destroying orthodoxy, at least the intended orthodoxy of these people from within. And true orthodoxy, obviously, I think there is true orthodoxy in Ukraine, just as there is in Russia. But most of the population doesn't go to church.
Yeah.
Right. So this is what people must also take into consideration when they say, "Oh, it's like different Orthodox people killing each other." It's only in a cultural sense. You have to understand that. It's like people talk about their cultural Protestants or whatever. They never go to church at all. So most Ukrainians, most Russians don't go to church. The soldiers don't go to church. They have these photo ops where there's the Ukrainian or Russian soldiers with a priest and he's blessing them and whatever. That is a photo op in many ways. And the result is to the world, it looks like, there's like this conflict between these two like supposedly devout Orthodox peoples. But what is in reality happening is you have this conflict between essentially two, closely related people of Rus. All right, if you accept Ukrainians as a truly independent people, but at the very least, they're probably the most close related people to the Veleko Russians possible. Right, who are for the most part, de facto atheists. All right, in their actual practical lives. And they treat Orthodoxy almost in a superstitious sense. That is, making the sign of the cross if grandma's there, or maybe you go to church once in a blue moon every few years. If you're once babushka or grandma or whatever begs you to go there. All right. Yeah. So it's this tragedy where you think people kind of think that the UOCMP or the OCU or truly these like popular bodies, whereas a lot of times when they count numbers for themselves, they're counting basically people with baptismal registers, unfortunately. And this is it's just like the same situation in America.
Well, I will say this question did come up for you, Vladiko, so I will put that up, and then we'll get back to the Ukraine discussion.
If you can contact, I have it. I don't. I'd have to go search my library. If you can ever contact Father Romaric, who has a YouTube channel, it's the only French Orthodox YouTube channel.
If you're on Discord, he's also on our Discord.
He knows the book, and I know he's used it because he's talked about that same issue that was brought up about the Holy Fire in Jerusalem before, and he brought up a lot of this stuff to me and such about the what have you. But I do remember reading from it that about the Crusaders when they took over and what have you and such. So.
Okay. Now I want to give others, if Father Boniface or Anonymous Man or Atomic Lead or Reader John, if you want to throw any of your thoughts in before we go into, I guess more talk about Russia, Ukraine, which is
that's talk to death to some extent, but.
I was just going to ask two questions. They're unrelated, but they're two questions. One, what is the patristic commentary on this part of the Gospel of Saint Mark? I forget what passage it is, but I know the scene. It's where Christ just got betrayed and arrested, and out of nowhere, like a man basically runs into the night, naked.
No,
and
St. John's Gospel. St. John. What happened is one of the soldiers tried to grab St. John, and they tore his robe off, and he ran. Let me look at the exact verse. St. John, Gospel of John.
Well, also before doing that search, I do want to recommend Anonymous Man. If you're talking about the Gospels and Epistles, you want to check out either Tertullian.org or the Christian Classics Ethereal Library Church Fathers page, because St. John Chrysostom and St. Augustine both wrote copious volumes on the Gospels and on the Epistles. So you will always find a commentary there.
This may be Mark 14, actually. I may have been mistaken.
Yeah. Mark 14. That just utterly spooked me. Spooked the heck out of me. I was like, wait, what?
I almost want to. I sometimes you have to compare all the passion narratives from all the four Gospels, because they all are true accounts, and they all contain different aspects, like seen from different perspectives and such.
Yeah, they complement each other. I noticed that.
Yes. So let me look. 1446. It says, so and 1444 says, and he that betrayeth him, that is Judas, had given them a token, saying, whomsoever I shall kiss, the same as he, take him and lead him away safely. And as soon as he was come, he goeth straightway to him and saith, Master, Master, and kissed him. So Judas gives the kiss of betrayal to our Lord. And they laid hands on him and took him. And one of them that stood by drew a sword. Well, we know who that is from the other Gospels. That's St. Peter.
Mm-hmm.
And smote a servant of the high priest. That's Malchus, the servant, cut off his ear. All right. And Jesus answered and said unto them, Are ye come out as against a thief with swords and staves to take me? I was daily with you in the temple teaching, and ye took me not, but the scriptures must be fulfilled. And they all forsook and fled him. And there followed a certain young man, having a linen cloth cast about his naked body. And the young men, that is the soldiers, who came to arrest the Lord, laid hold of him, and he left the linen cloth and fled from them naked. So let's see. Do they have a patristic commentary? There's got to be one on Mark somewhere, and I do not see it in the Nicene, post-Nicene, early Erdman series. I think we'd have to look it up. But I for some reason, believe that the young men they're talking about is St. John, the evangelist.
A good resource that is not available online is the Gospel according to Blessed Theophylact, because he covers each of the 4 volumes.
Commentary, not the Gospel according to St. Theophylact.
Yeah, the commentary on the Gospel. I thought that
he didn't write a Gospel. So
no. But I'm saying I thought that the title of the book was the Gospel. Okay. Anyway, the point is that it contains the patristic commentary for all the Gospels, etc.
All right. Now I have here Mark chapter 14 with commentary by Pseudo Jerome Bede, Theophylact, Augustine.
Yeah. Those are all good. What are you using, an app or what type of a?
The problem is that I'm using the Catena Aurea, which is a compilation done by Thomas Aquinas.
Yeah, but he does compile some of the patristic quotes on the text.
So I put it on the sidebar on the chat. I've got a URL hit for it, and I mean it's just Aquinas is not there. It's all the fathers, and I find it very valuable because it'll give you the verse, and then it'll give you the commentaries on the verses. Chapter 14, 1 and 2 commentary. Then you go 3 through 9 commentary. Let me see here. You want to talk about the one who's running? Let me see.
It's verse 14 verses 51 and 52.
You can also use the app Catena. There's actually a Catena app that is available on the App Store and on the Google Play Store, which will actually give you the patristic commentaries. It's listing Jerome here, St. Gregory the Great, St. Bede, and St. Theophylact.
Yeah, that's the one I use.
Yeah, that's the easiest way if you're looking for a lazy way to do it. Download the Catena app, go to the verse, and click it, and it'll show you all of the commentary on it.
Yeah, Bede says, "For he was a young man at that time, is evident from his long sojourn in the flesh, because he escaped from the hands of those who held him for the time, and afterwards got back his garment and returned, mingling under cover of the darkness with those who were leading Jesus, as though he was one of them." So you see, you got Bede writing a comment on his escape. So there you go. I put it on the sidebar, and
okay,
you can see it.
Yeah, I'm putting a link to the app as well. If you have Android, I guess I can look for the App Store one too. If you have Apple,
right
here. And so
I just checked the OSB on that. Now that's the OSB. It's not a great source, and it just says it's St. John. It doesn't explain which Holy Fathers.
I remember reading that some of the Holy Fathers. Now there is a Roman Catholic site. When I looked up Google this question, that does say Saint Epiphanius and Saint Jerome thought it was Saint James, the Lord's the brother of the Lord or the cousin of the Lord. They say other writers like Saint Chrysostom, Ambrose, and Saint Gregory say it's Saint John, and that's the one I remember. And such, and they say Theophylact and Saint Euthemius, think the young man was someone from the house of John Mark, in which Christ had eaten the Passover with, or the last meal with.
Just to compromise that, so the first 2 books of the Medieval Hours by St. Gregory Press, good starters. They actually form the body of most of the year.
So there's volume 1, which is the Psalter with the Divine Office outside of Paschaltide, and there's volume 2, which is a Psalter for the Paschal
inside of Paschaltide.
Yes.
So yeah, you'll cover basically the whole year.
So those would be the base, and that's entirely based off the Rule of Saint Benedict explicitly, as well as the
The Portforium of Oswaldi.
Portforium, the Oswaldi, those texts and such. So that's what you call the basics of it. That's like in the Eastern like liturgical books, you would have like the Horologion, all right?
Yeah.
But then you have all the proper of the season, the Meneon, throughout the year then for the saints and the months and such. But you can do things just from the Horologion, but you're going to if you want to do everything properly, you're going to ultimately need a lot of some other books for feasts and Lent and things like that, and what have you.
So is the Ordo like the Typicon?
An Ordo just means an order of service. So you can have an Ordo for the liturgy of the Mass. You can have an Ordo for the Divine Office. It gives the essential parts of the Divine Office and the Divine Services, basically. And then there's the variable parts that change throughout the seasons.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with it's probably Saint Jerome, unless it's been definitively proven it's not him.
I get lost in the Western Rite terminology.
It happens.
No problem. Ordo in Greek it would mean taxes. Typica would be maybe somewhat another translation of it.
Yeah, Typicon. Well, that Typicon is actually the order of the services as well. So.
Well, Typicon just describes how things are going or how are to be done. That would be more equivalent to what's called a directorium or customary and such. Just like, for example, in Anglo-Saxon England, they had something called the Menologion. But when they used the word Menologion, what it meant was a calendar. All right, basically going through the saints of the year and such. But it didn't have explicit liturgical material in it. So. Okay.
Oh, okay. I was just gonna ask the second question because my phone's about to die.
Okay, go for it.
All right. What do you guys think of the Death to the World, The Last True Rebellion, Orthodox magazine? I came across it, and admittedly, as someone who was a metalhead, and particularly in high school, it kind of drew me in.
I think it. I mean, I remember when it first came out. I saw it in the late '90s. I thought it was pretty cool back then as a kid. I mean, if it still attracts kids to possibly interest in the faith, I'm not against it. I haven't read anything from it recently. It doesn't strike my fancy anymore.
It seemed to me sounded kind of gimmicky. Like, I mean, just the metal.
Well, back when it was a zine, it was kind of cool because they didn't really have it was before the era of websites, and so getting this piece of paper photocopied was kind of fun.
Yeah. I'm just always a little cautious about when, let's try to attract the kids through.
I know, yeah. How do you do, fellow kids?
Yeah. How do you, it's like some Orthodox monk we're going to show up and I also am interested in death and such.
Gloria tried it.
It always felt like too Protestant. It was like the anti-chick track kind of thing.
Like I remember when I was a teenager, and I remember going to because before I was Orthodox, I was obviously a Protestant when I was like 15 and such, and I remember hearing this older, this 89-year-old Free Will Baptist who had been this one Free Will Baptist church for 50 years. They can never get rid of him. But anyway, pastor, and he was talking he was like, now I want to rap with the young people.
Oh no!
And I was like, and then he began to talk about
YouTube has murdered that genre. There is the rapping for Jesus.
But he was this 89-year-old guy who was Dutch. From a Dutch family. It was very strange. And then I was about to just walk out because I was getting, it's major cringe. I hate to use that expression. It was now I gotta talk about, and then I'm not going to get too explicit, but he was like, now I have to talk about the joys of why you need to wait until after marriage. I mean, obviously, and why and that's fine that you should, obviously that is a church teaching. You should be abstinent and to proper marriage, but he didn't really need to act like he was hip and try to use lingo and other stuff and to me his lingo sounded like it was from the 1960s.
At least he didn't hang with the homies.
Yeah. So
you're not making rock music better. You're making Christianity worse.
Yeah, and I remember this from a teenager. The whole like TBN scene and the Christian so-called Christian rock, and it talked to me. A lot of it just seemed highly contrived.
Yeah.
And it seemed to me like they were just trying to take sort of this musical genre that had been developed in the 70s or 80s, and they were going along with whatever fad that existed. And oftentimes it wasn't the quality of it wasn't necessarily as great because it was really derivative, for lack of a better word.
So like Pat Boone.
Yes, and I remember there was a guy called Carmen. I don't know if you remember him.
Yeah, I remember him.
You remember him? I remember all those guys, and I didn't. Some of it may have to me as like a 12-year-old seemed entertaining, but then you kind of quickly got tired of it. And I'd have friends be like, "You got to listen to the new record by so and so." I was like, "I don't listen to regular records anyway. I don't want definitely want to listen to this." And even like when I was 12 or 13, I was like, "This doesn't." This just seems it seems contrived. It seemed like they were trying to bring too much of like the fads of the world into each decade of each year into each decade, and then they were even 4 years behind the regular fad.
So what you would say is you were starving for authenticity.
Absolutely, and that's why not just me. I'm sure you, a lot of us.
Oh yeah.
I think everyone in this room.
Exactly. We all saw something similar, or at least have some sort of experience like that. Where it simply was like, no, this is this is not. I mean, I heard enough of that stuff about dead religion, liturgy is dead religion, and it doesn't really save, and et cetera, et cetera. And then you read the Bible from the Old to the New Testament, and it's very evident going through Book of Acts, the Epistles, the Book of Revelation, the Gospels, not to mention the Old Testament, that God has always had His people follow an order of service of some sort.
He's always had a taxis.
A taxis, an ordo, a taxis, exactly. That's always been the case. And people telling me, I remember growing up, they're like, we don't have a religion, we have a relationship with the Lord. I was like, what does St. James mean when he says pure religion and undefiled, for God and the Father is helping orphans? He's using the word religion in a positive sense. All right. Again, I used to know of I can't remember. I used to know on Facebook Henry was his name, and we used to talk about this. And again, his point was a lot of this is like gimmicks, all right, and they're trying to attract people through almost a gimmicky methodology. But what happens when the gimmick wears off? And then,
that's a history of modern Protestantism.
Yes. Your Protestant is touching my orthodoxy.
I mean, even in papism, they when the very contrived, self-conscious aping of pseudo folk music, when they decided to destroy their entire musical tradition in the 60s and 70s.
So you haven't heard the Appalachian version of Christ is Risen, have you?
Yeah, I mean, that to me, that smacks. I mean, people may get upset, but that sort of smacks of something similar.
Yeah, to me.
It may not sound as bad from an aesthetic perspective as, let's say, trying to do rock Byzantine chant or something crazy like that, or rap chant, or I don't know, whatever they would, or whatever. But you're still. Do you really want to go down that route? All right. Mm-hmm. When there are ancient chant traditions. In fact, years ago there was I used to follow like YouTube channels. I still kind of did studies of like Gregorian chant and Byzantine chant. I'm not like an expert. I was trying to follow along. And there was one that was the chant. It was just simply a video of the chant melody of the Our Father in the ancient Gregorian melody. And on the comments, there were all these angry music students in college. All right, and they were like angry atheist Reddit music students, for lack of a better word, who were like, my teacher said I had to listen to this and this is horrible. This is why do they have this? This isn't very complicated. This isn't like, well, you don't want to make the Our Father melody super complicated if you want everybody chanting it and saying it at the services. All right, if you want people to sing along at certain parts of the divine services. You're not necessarily going to create some complicated 4-part harmony that only have Now, I'm not saying that's bad for Shruba Kim or what have you, but there have to be parts of the service. They're like Carpatho-Russian tradition in the East. All right, anciently has a congregation.
The Prostopenia chant.
Yeah, exactly. That's very simple and it's still very profound. There is complex Gregorian music, just prolix chant it's called, just like there is in any other chant tradition. But you're not necessarily going to create a complex chant tradition, a complex prolix melody if you want everybody from 2 years old to 82-year-old new converts from paganism to learn how to sing. All right. So, but the point is that is something that was something perennial, not in the bad sense of perennialism. Those are chant traditions that prove the test of time when they were actually used and taught. All right, people found them. They had an attitude and an ethos to them that lasted for 2,000 years or 1,800 years. They all came from an ancient source and such. All right, whereas these new musical fads or what have you, no one's gonna remember that in not 100 years, but even 20 years. People are just, except people like us, who are just going to remember from vague memories of childhood. So, sorry.
Well, that's an interesting topic as far as the Psalter now, because you have some sections that are difficult and others that are relatively easy.
Yes.
And then I've had to, Saba and Ezekiel were over, and in order for people who don't know it much at all to immediately adapt, basically you would have to set aside some of the form and just use a simple style of plain chant. Some simple monotone and then an up or a down.
Yes, well, they're ultimately made for repetitive usage. You know what I mean? So it's not so like people are. The idea is you're going to like the services every week for several years or every day, for several years. Like, for example, I learned everything simply, in the monastery because we do it every single day. All right. And you start out not great, to be honest. All right. And after about a year, you basically have, and you're doing it every single day. You're hearing like Vladika do it or Father Vincent or Kenner Gregory. You sort of learn how things are done, how things are sung, and it just simply takes time. I mean, for example, I could not go to a church that used Georgian chant, okay, even if it was in English, and learn everything in 3 days. All right, Georgian chant from the church from Georgia. It would take some time to get that down as such. But no, you're right. That's sort of the issue with not the problem, but the richness of the chant traditions is that they're ultimately meant to be like immersed. People are to be immersed in them, so it becomes like second nature to you. All right, just like the Psalter, and that's why until very relatively recently, people don't realize this. Things like printed Psalters, you didn't have them to the printing press. All right. Even in monasteries, how did monks sing the Psalter or recite the Psalter? Well, there was memory. All right. How do they know the antiphons and the hymns? Well, you learned them by memory. All right. Everything was memorized after months, or really in some cases years. That just takes time, and people, you'll get through it.
Well, I think that you'll see that when you see pictures of monks, there's one book and they're all around the book.
Yes.
Reading from the book. So anyway, but I think that the challenge I'm having in a way is a form that the Western Rite has their Psalters, Volume 1, for example, and then some of these sections are difficult. The Magnificat is not easy. I talked to Vladika John about that. The Gospels are not easy. The Psalms, the tones are some are easier than others. And so it's basically getting a form down and teaching it. And I'm kind of like learning it and teaching it as I go. But But let's say the Church of England has such a long history, but it starts after the schism with the Church of England chant or the Roman Latin chant. So we're going before that, and there are some Latin chant that is good, and before that, but we're looking at English, and all these things kind of create a picture. It's a little bit foggy.
Well, again, it's one of the things. Obviously, we don't use like musical instruments in church services, but one of the things I would recommend if you want to like get better at the Magnificat tones is if you do have like you go in your house and you understand you have like maybe a little keyboard, all right, and you hit the keys, all right, for each note. And that can kind of help you, and then you practice that over and over again. So when you do a cappella in church, that's why we call it a cappella, because at the chapel, you'll get better. My advantage was simply this is what I heard from the moment I was baptized until now. So this is just for me. That's life. I mean that's all I can say. But practice makes perfect, Father, and you, like others, will get better. So,
hearing it in a musical form actually helps you memorize better. Like, for example, if you do like your ABCs, I think everybody knows the ABC song, right?
A, B, C, D, E, F, G, right?
Yeah. See, that helped you memorize the ABCs, right? Because
one thing that one of our fathers, one of our older fathers pointed out is that if you want to understand the Gregorian chant notation system, there was actually an old commercial for Nestle. Their jingle actually comprises the scale, so it would be like NESTLES, Nestle's is the very best chocolate. Like that's the entire scale for Gregorian chant.
I feel old now.
That's why I did it.
All right. Do we have any more questions, or are we?
I think there's no more questions.
Really long, so
yeah, this we are now in the third hour of the stream, and so I would like to thank everybody who contributed, everyone who joined in, everyone who came in with questions. We do this every Sunday, not usually this long, but this was an interesting discussion where we were all available. Thanks to everyone who is on the stream now. Thanks to everyone who was on the stream previously. And thank you everyone in the chat for your questions, comments, so on. Again, let me see here. Okay, Matsushka Stephanie Dobis says, I learned tone 8 from the monastic psalter, then during services tone 8 changed. It's kind of confusing, but Bishop Enoch gave a great tip of using
there are different
keyboard.
forms of tone 8 as well.
Yeah.
This is when you this is sort of what you find out, that the tone system in regards to the Psalms, all right, in the Magnificat, that they have the each tone has general similarities to it. They were classified like that because they were sort of similar. Certain like 3 or 4 variations are similar and such.
Yep.
So like just people know tone 2, and when we say, and then of course people will say like, oh, this antiphon or responsory is in tone 8 or mode 8 or whatever, and they're like, well, that doesn't sound like the Psalm tone 8. Well, in a kinda and kinda not, because it's a far more elaborate version of it. And a lot, one of the things you must understand with like musical classification, even when they begin to classify these in the 700s and 800s, or even before that, was oftentimes chant tradition, like Gregorian chant or Roman chant. It's a repertoire where they absorbed multiple different chant traditions throughout Italy and parts of Gaul. All right. And like the cantors were like, well, we have to systematize it somehow. All right. So they, for lack of a better, did the best they could.
Yeah.
And I mean, I have known people, monks and cantors, who would tell me, yeah, they can tell you right off the bat that they can hear an antiphon without even knowing what's written in the manuscript for what tone is. This is mode so, this is mode 4. All right. Or mode 7. They'll know right away, but I won't. I'll have like, I don't. How do you know that? And they're like, well, if you look at the last the not to the penultimate, but the penultimate to the penultimate notes how it goes down and up. That's similar to the psalm tone in this sense, and if
they're using kind of like mnemonics from the actual notes.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there are books written about this, and even books in Byzantine chant and other chants about this, where they can say like like you can have like some complex. You do have complex Byzantine cherubicons, and they'll say this is in mode so and so. Okay, and it may be difficult for us to think, or tone 8 or tone whatever. And like, how does that really? That doesn't sound like the Apolytikion in tone 8. But they'll say, no. This was written by Cantor so and so in 1720 at the Great Church, and it is in tone 8, and they'll give this elaborate explanation.
This is also why the best chanters and most knowledgeable ones often have. They usually command a salary and go from parish to parish.
My chant understanding is just on the job chant understanding.
Yeah.
The Vladiga John told me that, and I did ask him some questions about this, was that they'll have the same tone but different pattern according to a day: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then sometimes according to the feast. And so you'll have the same tone. And then, of course, if you look at the notes, one may start off higher in the scale, but it'll be the same pattern. And then it may be lower in the scale, same pattern. And basically, I think the pattern is that it's either in the key of C or it's in the key of what? What's the other one? There are only two.
F
the
sometimes.
C or F.
Yeah.
Yeah, C or F. There are two clefs. One's a C clef, the other's an F clef. And then that will basically tell you where the sharps and flats are. But
it doesn't necessarily tell you whether it's a high C or an high F or low F, because that's supposed to be the guy the cantor who intones everything is supposed to decide that. And
that's a good thing, because you can do it according to your ability.
Yes, because obviously what the reason that is because you don't if everybody's I'm not even like if you're like a very high voice. All right, and then you got someone with a very low voice.
Yeah.
You have a mixed choir of people. You have to go somewhere in the middle, because otherwise, you can't start off like oh, and then I'm a guy who speaks like oh, how are you supposed to do that? So you have to accommodate the other. You're supposed to practice also. Well, I'm going to go ahead and go, but Father Boniface, I'll wait for you after.
Yeah, we're going to close up. We're actually going to close up the stream now. Again, I want to thank everybody who was here. I want to thank everyone who contributed. Everybody who contributed with questions, comments, concerns. We do this every Sunday. And as I mentioned earlier, it's kind of bill time. So anything you can do to help, whether it's through the Give, Send, Go, whether it's through the website on nftu.net or through crypto, we could use it. I cannot be more emphatic. And thank you. We've got this in here. That was a lovely demonstration.
My fault with the high voice. No.
Okay, and thank you and have a great night. Death to Compromise. Thank you everybody for participating, and we'll see you again next Sunday, God willing.
The prayers of Holy Father, the Lord Jesus Christ, our God, have mercy upon us and save us. Amen.
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 Have a good night, all.
Thank you.